Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fifth episode of Conceptualism. Today, I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Niranjan Rajah, who is a conceptual artist, a performance artist, a photographer, and and an academic, an intellectual. And currently, I think you work at the University of British Columbia as a professor.
Simon Fraser University,
Simon Fraser.
School of Interactive Arts and Technology, Simon Fraser.
Excellent. Well, so there we are. Thank you for the correction. So I'm very, very happy that you're here with me today. We've had lots of interesting conversations, and phone calls, and I thought it was time to get some of this documented, some of this, these ideas and these concepts that we have been discussing.
Yeah, no, it's been fun talking to you and getting the idea that there's more to art than just making it, which is I think the theme of your podcast. So yeah, it's been fun talking, and now it's nice to do it in a more public way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and so I think it's important that we that we talk about the distinction between being an artist and being a conceptual artist, because like you said, conceptual art is not just about the making of the piece of art. It's about the process. It's about the it's about the critical thought and the dialogue that and the the philosophy that surrounds the making of the art itself.
Yeah, so from the visual arts point of view, you can say that the term emerges from the sort of Fluxus period, 1960 or so. And then towards the end of the 60s, it gets sort of really established with works like in America, Joseph Kosuth, and in the UK, Terry Atkinson, Art and Language, and there's sort of a transatlantic connection, and even in Canada, NASCAD, and so there's this sort of movement that took place, wherein the making itself and the product seemed less important than the idea behind it. Even the process, first there was the movement towards process away from object, but then suddenly there's this window in which the materiality of the process itself seemed excessive, and people wanted to explore the pure idea. It's almost like a return to the idea.
Right.
And the process became more important than the object, the finished object, but even the process was not as important as the idea being expressed. So everything was, as long as there was sufficient means to express the idea, the work was done. So things were very scrappy, and it was very cool for a while, but my own critique of that whole era is that all those radical gestures of discarding, materiality, discarding the pretension of form and so on, at least material, visual form, all that pure idea was quickly assimilated back into the mainstream, because scraps of paper became as valuable as, gilded canvases. So it becomes a kind of a gesture that had a moment, and you can't do it again, because we now know that even a scrap of paper is art, and you can't get away from that idea. So,
Right.
So I think we've had to change our strategies, people using this approach. But from Duchamp onwards, you can say we've been moving back and forth along this, moving along. And now we are in the digital era, so things are different again. We're totally into the abstraction of the medium, and yeah, it'll be cool to see how you see some of this stuff from the music perspective. And
Right, and also from the performance perspective and from the installation perspective, because one of the artists I most revere is Brian Eno, and you know, his work certainly questions that idea of music and sound art and performance and installation and you know, for example, his installation 77 million paintings. You know, I think it's 200 hand drawn slides which are recombined by a computer in apparently infinite ways. Like I think he said that the installation wouldn't repeat itself in 10,000 years, something like that.
Mm.
You know, and
Yeah, go on, go on.
so
Tell me more.
I was just gonna say that, like, you know, in terms of abstraction, I mean, this is something that really, you know, that that really questions what, you know, what art is, you know, because of course the input, the starting input, the set of rules that was conceived, yes, it was made by the artist, but the results, you know, the process itself is completely controlled by a computer. So in that sense, you know, the you know, are you a composer, are you an artist, or are you just you know, like a operator of a machine? You know, it brings into question these ideas of who is the artist, who is the composer, because, you know, from the romantic era, the idea of the composer is that they would have a fully formed symphony in their head, and basically they write it down and have a bunch of instruments play it so that we can all hear what they hear in their head. Whereas this idea is more like gardening rather than architecture, where it's like, you know, you put a bunch of seeds in the ground and you see how they grow, and then you sort of, you know, you trim the plants and you prune, and, you know, you sort of, you get a garden, but every time you plant the seeds, you know, you're going to get different results. So it's more chance based, you know, it's more aleatoric, I suppose, the whole
Yeah,
process.
no, I see. That's a lovely metaphor, the garden. The idea that, you know, the artist works within a flow. So in a way, the garden or the Chinese brush painting, it's the same kind of space where the artist is master of, mistress of of an intervention within something that's going on,
Right.
right? So yes, you are an expert. You're still sort of controlling something, but you're controlling less.
Right.
You're letting go of a lot more, and you're accepting a lot more random outcomes, but
Right.
you're still managing it. You know, there's a little bit of of uh, of uh, a sense of displacement of the authorship into the event and whatever is part of the event, whether it's other people, um, whether it's nature, but still the authorship is there. There's no doubt about that. You know, very few artists have seriously given up, you know, done the effort, because it's an effort to actually
Erase your personality.
erase yourself. And I think the best work in this area is in community arts, and we don't even know about these works because they're not trying to be seen. You know, they're actually working in the community, developing,
Right.
doing good works in the community
Yeah.
using art and art strategies,
Yeah.
but they're not signatures. They don't surface in the same way.
Right.
So I wouldn't put myself in that category. I'm a little bit more still like saying, okay, look, I'm the artist. But I'm not an artist that works too hard to be seen in the art world. I'm interested in that, but it's more important to be an artist. It's my life. It's my vocation.
Right.
And I try to be true to that idea while taking opportunities that come,
Right.
and being part of the art scene is absolutely no problem to me. But it's not the main focus. It's to
Yeah.
do something that makes sense in itself in my life. Um, so it's odd. So the Cowboy Project is just one part. It's a big part of what I'm doing now.
Right.
But it's kind of like, you know, it's about becoming the cowboy as
Right.
much as it is about being, you know, making art. Like, so this is my life. Um, I'm since 2013, I've slowly become more and more this persona, you know, this, so the space between um, me and the cowboy is narrowing, it's shrinking.
Huh.
And yeah, so it's interesting because will I still be the cowboy when the cowboy project is done? That's the question.
Right. And actually, I have a cowboy hat, and I was going to wear it for the interview, but then I thought to myself, you're the cowboy, so
Yeah.
would it be appropriation for me to wear a cowboy hat? In when you're really the cowboy in this.
Yeah, it would have been funny if you wore it and I didn't wear mine.
Right. Yeah, it would be funny. It would have been hilarious. But when I saw that you were wearing the hat, I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe I should have worn the hat. Would have both been wearing the cowboy hat.
Yeah, and that's actually you've just described the modality of the work. It's between that sense of artifice and the sense of reality and self. So you have a cowboy hat regardless of me and this particular event.
Yes.
And for some reason you have it. It's part of your life, and maybe it's your art accoutrement, maybe it's just for fun, maybe it's a souvenir, but you have it and you use it, I presume.
I do. Yes.
And so it has the opportunity to be a part of an art piece, but it's actually a part of your life. And so this is the space that I work in. And the photographs, the way I pitch these photographs, which I don't take obviously because I'm in most of them, the way they're pitched is exactly like that as well. Between expertise and automation, the cameras these days are better than the average photographer. Between selfie and family photo and very intentional conceptual gesture, they kind of get lost and they meander in that space, back and forth.
Which is why when some people look at these photographs, they're really not sure what to make of them, or how they fit really into a certain narrative, because we think of a photographer as being behind the lens and as somebody who is sort of almost staging something, but to me your photographs seem more like almost like you're a landscape photographer who's capturing a narrative of some sort.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing to me as well, because a lot of it is terribly staged, right? Conceptually, it's a forethought. Everything is really like I'm trying to capture an idea through passing through a scene, right? And then the camera is in someone else's hands. They have sometimes an idea what I want, sometimes they don't. So some of them are very, very deliberate. Some of them are completely random, like unintended images enter the series. And the meaning is always made afterwards. It's the editorial process where the work is finalized and then hopefully left open enough. It's kind of a meta editorial process. So the photography is like that. Then they're selected and sequenced. Then they're titled in that sequencing process. So that brings a whole other dimension. The language is really important. Quite a lot of the time it's in Malay, which is a language of mine, Tamil, which is another language of mine. Sometimes I use languages that are not like Thai and Japanese. I've studied enough to use for titling. And I used very idiomatic expressions that are difficult to translate sometimes.
Yeah.
So the language becomes important. And then finally, it comes back to what you're saying, where it's out there and people have to make of it what they will,
right?
And so it gets reorganized again. So they're very dense and rich, and people definitely won't get everything, but they will get something based on their own knowledge and experience.
Right.
And what's most familiar will be this kind of idea of being present in a photograph in a semi-posy, semi-natural way.
Right.
Like all of us take photos like this. So that is the feel of it. But the idea is actually, it's hard. I've been struggling with what to call my work. So I was really excited first, and I thought I'd take the Vancouver school, as a starting place, because in a way I'm working here for the last 10 years, and really Jeff Wall and Ken Lam and the Vancouver Rodney Graham artists, really, they really are quite amazing and in photography.
Yes.
And I've loved their work, but I've always been a bit like, so staged, so over the top, okay, So my works are kind of throwaway Vancouver School, post Vancouver School junk, right? That's how I kind of see my work. So I thought I'd call it post-conceptual for photography, right? Post-conceptual or photo-conceptual, something like that.
Yeah.
But then as I was doing the work years down, I realized actually, although the concept is important, it slipped down a notch. These are more like performances that are recorded, like documentations. So now I kind of slip the conceptual word out, although it remains it's implied.
Right.
I see them as photo performances.
I like that. I like that very much. I think that actually captures the concept very well, because and the thing is, of course, a photograph is a moment. So, and usually when people think about performance, they think about, a series of moments. So not just one moment. So they like the idea is that, maybe a film or a motion picture would better capture a performance.
That's right.
But I actually think that photographs of performances are very powerful, because you have to choose that exact moment that you're going to capture, and say, this is the moment that is either the climax of the performance or an important moment in the performance that's worth documenting.
Yeah, and you speak of film, and one of the things I again realized as I've been working, the works are generally a series of 12 images. Sometimes they're all from one performance. Sometimes they're gathered over a period of time, different geographical locations. There's different approaches to the different series, but usually it's either 12 or 2. Most of them are 12. I think there are 3 series with 2 images, like a duality of images. And one of the things phrases I've found coming to my mind is, oh, this is like a storyboard without a film. My own work, like looking at it, it's like, it's so narrative oriented, but the gaps are there, right? There's no movement between images, they're jumps. So it's what you said, it's 12 moments and a lot of space in between. And ideas can enter in those gaps, right? So yeah.
You know what? I kind of want to grab my hat and I want to put it on. So I'm actually
hey, cool. Let's do it.
So this is a gaucho.
Oh, nice. That's nice. Oh, that's a big wide brim.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
And it was given to me as a gift. I was staying with this woman in Nova Scotia, and this had been given to her by a man who was trying to win her over, who was trying to court her, and she had to keep rejecting his advances and saying, no, thank you. But one of the things he did was he gave her this hat, and so she had it sitting around, and I saw it and I said, this is a beautiful hat, and she said, do you want it? And I said, what? She's like, do you want it? I said, okay. So that's how I acquired it, and I've worn it on stage. Along with a fur coat, so of course you get an idea of some of the flamboyance in my outfits. I like to push the boundaries, on what people see as politically or even even in terms of taste. Like, I like to question the boundaries of people's taste. Like wearing a cowboy hat, and cowboy boots with a leather jacket, and I don't know, like corduroy pants, like just all kinds of weird combinations. And maybe they're not even that weird, because like some of them are inspired by a particular time period or by particular,
yeah,
like,
yeah. So I think this is in a way it's obvious. It doesn't need to be said, but isn't it all a performance, right? Whether you're aware of it or not. Getting up and going out of the house now with COVID, we don't do that anymore, and we're not performing. Where people are not doing that performance. They're not, they're turning their cameras off or they're making, they're performing with the torso. Like, have I got shoes on, right? So I'm dressed, but only a certain portion is shared. So,
That's right.
I think because of COVID now, we're experiencing this utter sort of recognition that the public space is a kind of performance space.
Yes.
Because without that interaction, our lives are very dull, and it's like actually like it's like not having a TV, right?
Right.
And that song, that Beatles song, like Eleanor Rigby, always comes to mind. I'm not sure what they actually meant by it, but wearing a face that she keeps in the jar by the door.
Yeah, that's
that's
an iconic line of poetry. And
it's what we all do, right? We put on a face to go out,
yes.
to be present. We put
right.
on a face.
So the many masks that we wear,
Yeah.
Each one is sort of tailored for a particular situation, for a particular, and they talk about the mask that we have to take off at the end of the day when we look at ourselves in the mirror. That's the mask that nobody sees. It's the one that we keep to ourselves.
Yeah, that's still a mask. Even that is still a mask.
Right. And so then you start asking the question, what is the true face? What is the essence? Like how can we go back to, where there are no layers, where there's just the truth, where there's just the truth. And I think art can help us examine and re-examine those conceptions and preconceptions that exist.
Yeah, or at least glimpse at it, or understand the process of unveiling, even if it doesn't get us there, right? Because I think getting there is a much higher task than art alone.
It is, yes. It's a spiritual journey.
Yeah.
That we all have to take, or that we don't have to take, but that is there for us to take if we so
yes.
Yeah.
And art is definitely a part of that. Even popular, simple, fun stuff. It's all part of that possibility, I think.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to bring to light one of the people who you've seen as a collaborator, as a friend, and you nominated her for the Governor General Award, and that would be Zainab Virji. And I wanted to ask you about that collaboration between her and you, and and sort of the fruits of that relationship, because it seems like you guys have done a lot of work together.
Yeah, we have and we haven't, right? We've always been quite far apart, right? She's been based on the East Coast, and
yes.
I've been here.
Yeah.
And we've collaborated across different categories, so never really together as peers, as artists together, or anything like that. So it begins with me arriving in 2002. And there's a long story, but we were struggling quite a lot with things that we were expecting, a certain entry into Vancouver with jobs and things fell apart. And so there was a struggle. And in the course of that struggle, I got involved with the New Forms Festival. I didn't really have a job, and I was sort of practically volunteering to run the conference for, I think, 2004 New Forms Festival. And I put everything I had into it, all my theory. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything else to do.
Right.
So it was quite an amazing mega event. We had invited Ranjit Makuni, one of the leaders of the Indian art and technology movement, and as a keynote. And it was a big project. And the Canada Council got involved. And Zainab was a media arts officer then. Right. So the funding applications went through her hands, and that's not me. That's the whole festival, right? Went through, and so she came, and the money came through from various sources. It was quite successful. I was with the New Forms Festival for 2004 and 2005, and I ran 2 conferences on the theme, which I continue to develop, which is post-tradition. Right. Which is modernity with an awareness of the living traditions that constitute our culture. I think people kind of forgot that in the 20th century, much of the 20th century. Yeah. But actually, the modern is just a thin crust over all the old stuff, right. Which keeps poking up now in ugly ways as well as in wonderful ways. So Zainab was part of that. And, she loved what I was doing, and she was so supportive, not just to me, but to the whole endeavor. I was really amazed at her commitment to new media and her commitment to diversity, and we became friends. So since then, I've been, occasionally, I would say occasionally, while she was still with the Canada Council, invited on, various committees, award committees and advisory committees,
right.
Grant committees, and worked with her like that. Under her guidance, the committees are run to do these things. And then otherwise, we've been friends. Every time we go to the East, we meet, and Naren and Zainab are like our close friends in Canada. That's. So then the Governor General thing is like, we really felt that that Zainab needed recognition. Like we, meaning it wasn't just me. There's a lot of support in putting that application together. There was a sense that Zainab is a person that needed to be considered, at least for this,
Mm-hmm.
And I was privileged to do the writing for it and make the proposal, and she won. She is a laureate now, and we're very proud. I'm very proud of that. It's like, for me, on a very personal note, apart from satisfaction in getting the recognition for Zainab, personally for me, it's almost like a confirmation that I'm actually here in Canada, that I'm part of the art scene and a player, because it's really difficult to immigrate, mid-career. At least for me, it was very difficult because my work is very contextual.
Yeah.
And I still find it very difficult to engage in the way I want to engage in Canada. Whereas when I look back to Southeast Asia and Malaysia, I'm engaged. I can't disengage, Whereas here, it takes a long time to be meaningfully engaged in a context. You didn't grow up here. You don't have the roots here. For me, that's really part of the work. So that was a huge struggle. And in a way, the Cowboy Project solved the problem, because it, first of all, acknowledges that I'm not here, I'm over there. I'm living here, but actually as an artist, I'm over there.
Right.
And the whole project begins over there. And it struggles over, now it's 6, 7, 8 years, to integrate over there with over here. So as the series moves, it starts in Malaysia, Singapore, Southeast Asia, global, like Burning Man festivals, Tokyo, Bangkok, Portugal, Lisbon, but throughout that process, you can get a sense of the Canadian rootedness as well. So it's a diasporic work. The work itself is a diasporic exercise, trying to recognize myself in Canada, which is where my kids have grown up here. This is my place at the end of the day, not there. Although my identity seems to be screaming out more about there. This is really where I am. So the series is trying to mirror that. And well, it's not done yet. There's lots of bits.
I think that's quite beautiful, because I think that really to me exemplifies what being Canadian is about, which is that that we're a country of immigrants. We're a country of people that have roots in many different places. And that in order to have a truly cosmopolitan society, we have to respect and appreciate the places and the roots and the traditions and the cultures that people come from, and not try to erase them. So the fact is that actually, the Cowboy Project, I think is very important to showcasing actually what it means to be Canadian. Even though you don't feel like you're a Canadian, and even though you don't feel like you have roots here, this project sort of shows that you don't need to have, in the traditional sense of the word, roots in Canada in order to be Canadian.
Yes, no, I say, I mean, that is the beauty of Canada, with one qualification or one concern, really, unresolvable tragedy of Canadian identity, which is our relationship with the indigenous people and the history of colonization, right? Yes. So we come and we land on top of it. And, the superficial idea is, isn't Canada a wonderful place for us? Better than anywhere else. When we turn up, we're accepted. But we have to acknowledge that's happening on a history that we now assimilate to ourselves, the responsibilities. Yes. And I think one of the sensitivities of mine is this idea of engaging with indigenous people, indigenous issues, and so on. And how does one do it meaningfully? It has to be, put it this way, I'll speak about Sarawak. We were in Sarawak for 8 years. Sarawak is Borneo Island, tribal culture still thriving, longhouse life still going on. It's part of tourism, but it's actually also part of life. And, in all those years, and I was at a university with lots of connections with indigenous people, indigenous professors, and the idea of indigenous over there is kind of different, but it's kind of the same. We can get it. I think it's shorthand for the same thing. But I never made the trip, into the highlands or to visit a longhouse. I never wanted to go and see it, unless it emerged naturally. I just didn't want to do it. And I had a few relationships, but they were mostly in town, and we just kept it like that. We didn't go and do the tourism bit, and kind of regret it after, 8 years there. You didn't even go and see the do the longhouse tour. But it seemed like, that's not cool to me somehow, right? Yeah. So in Canada, one of my sad misses is I was developing this amazing relationship with Ahasu Maskegon Iskew. He's gone now. He's passed away, and we were, he was guest speaker at 2 of those New Forms conferences, and we really got it on, in terms of theory and the post-traditional. He was really interested in that from his very critical indigenous perspective. He's an amazing intellectual and performance artist, and it looked like that could be a natural sort of resonance there. And then, of course, we were far away across the continent, across North America, so we didn't really have that many chances to get together. And then he passed away, and I never really made a deep connection again since then, right? So I'm not trying, I don't believe in going out and trying to do that, but I miss that. And a little bit of in the Cowboy Project, you see some yearnings for that, or some engagements with the real Canada, the Turtle Island that Canada sits on top of. Yes. But nothing too deliberate, or nothing too direct. One opportunity really was when Malaysia's LNG giant Petronas Corporation became imminent that they would take over Lelu Island for LNG export plant, right? Processing plant. So then the two, not in terms of people, not like a friendship or anything, but my two worlds began to collide, because it became an issue in BC. Yeah. And it was an issue, so it's part of, Petronas is one of the world's largest oil corporations. It's a government corporation, and the country basically lives off the revenues of this corporation. They're very powerful, and basically they were dominating the scene in British Columbia. The liberals in British Columbia were kowtowing to them as if they were some kind of colonial power, getting whatever they wanted, getting all the deals, tax breaks they wanted, and so they were bullying BC a bit. And BC was desperate. The liberals were desperate for the LNG deal, as are the NDP at the end of the day. When they're in government, they all need that. They need the dam, and they need the corporations here. So there was this weird space of what's the right sentiment for me. On the one hand, I was like, yes, Malaysia, our corporations are like now world players, and look how they bully these sort of these so-called Western powers, like wow, Malaysia. But then when you look closer, they're actually like doing it on indigenous land against fishing rights, and traditions being crushed, potentially the salmon, the spawning areas, and then the environmental issues. Like I'm not too bothered for myself. I'm a kind of city person, and I kind of accept the degradation of the world. You know, you die, so the world will die. You know, the cosmos will die. So, you know, yes, we can slow it down, but is it such a big deal? You know, can we even do anything about it? I'm a little bit ambivalent like that. I'm not like anti-ecology or anything, but I'm a little bit like that. But when you think about how pristine British Columbia is, the waters here and so on, we have the opportunity to actually keep it that way.
Yeah.
And we're not, you know, we're letting these tankers go through, and my kids are here, and the future is here for my family. And so then I see Petronas as a huge threat to that, right? So the work, one of the series tries to deal with that relationship. So yeah, so it's Canadian, it's very Canadian at the end of the day, but it's not trumpeting that part. The obvious part is like the cowboy, you know, like what is that, right?
Yeah.
The skin color. What is the skin color? What is your identity? You know, where is it? Where does it sit? So there are many aspects to that project that are very personal. That's the other thing, autobiography and art. That's another thing I've learned in, you know, after like a lifetime in art, that even the most abstract work is actually somehow a signature, and it's autobiographical. You know, it's a trace of the artist. So,
yes.
So they are. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, like you said, you know, getting rid of that signature, or not having that signature in the work in the first place, you know, the only way you can do that is through community art projects, and also, you know, when you have collective experiments, collective social experiments, for example, you know, where you're documenting how people react to things, and or you know, stuff like that. So you know, but I like to ask, you know, the kinds of questions that make people, you know, uncomfortable. Like for example, you know, like how much of your ego is involved in, you know, in something that's autobiographical, you know, because here you are talking about yourself, you know, and you know, and some people would say, oh, you know, as an artist, you know, why should you talk about yourself? Isn't it about the work? Isn't it about the, you know, isn't it about the process of that work? Why are you talking about yourself? Or why should the self be important? And I think it's a good question, but I think it's a wrong question, because really, like, no matter who you are as an artist, you're always, I mean, yourself, your ego is always involved. Like you can't ever say there is nothing of who I am in this piece.
No, I think this is a really, really interesting point. And you're kind of coming to the nerve of my sense of reality, as well as everything else. There is this idea. It's kind of in the paper that I sent you as well. The distinction between subjectivity and objectivity, right? So what we have now, we have a picture of the cosmos, right? Let's say, let's start somewhere else and come back to this ego problem.
So
we have a picture of the cosmos. Say again?
We're taking a very macroscopic view.
Like, yes, let's start at the biggest place, you know, the universe, right? And we have an emerging picture of it from the most eminent minds of the moment, the scientists, the theorists, the physicists, and they're building a picture of a cyclical cosmos that comes and goes, that is made up of materials, elements that echoes amazingly the cosmos that the Indians, the Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains realized through different means. Definitely their methods were not empirical. They did have reasoning, of course, but the reasoning there was associated with inner. In fact, you could say it was empirical, but it was not to do with the material outer world. It was an inner empiricism, right? They observed themselves. Yes. So you could say that we're talking about two different kinds of empiricism: the objective empiricism of modern science, and the subjective empiricism, the first person empiricism of the traditional practices. And I remember, I don't know if I saw it on a video or on TV, but Carl Sagan used to have a series. I think it was called Cosmos. And there was one episode in which he talks about the Hindu cosmos, that model of the cyclical universe. Yeah. And he wonders and ponders how they came to this understanding, which only now the physicists are coming to, the way the universe might be evolving, emerging. And so without saying one system is better or whatever, I think what it showed me was perhaps the pictures that we make of what is going on in reality can be achieved through different approaches. One is going inwards and the other is going outwards. Okay. So now I try to bring it back to your question about the self and the ego. For me, I think the whole of my environment can be seen, can be pictured through me. And it's not really a question of ego, which is there. I mean, I love being cool or whatever that is, I hate
well, I think one of your students reviewed you as the hippest professor they've ever had. So you're doing something right. You're doing something right.
Yeah, so that's sure, that's there. That's part of the fun of life, right? But I think more important than that is that when you acknowledge subjectivity, that's as objective as you can be. Mm. Okay? So when you go towards objective data and larger numbers and so on, that seems more true. But it's still a question of which data set where did you cut the data?
Right. And there's no such thing as being completely and truly objective, because at the end of the day, depending on who observed the phenomenon, depending on, what perspective they were looking at it from, and in our case, it's the perspective from Earth, of course, it's going to be colored a certain way. It's like the idea that if you were near a supernova, let's say you're 1 mile away from a supernova, or you're 10,000 miles away from a supernova, the effect is very different. The way you experience it very different. The consequences are different. So even something like the Hubble Space Telescope, which orbits the Earth, it's still in a way observing the universe from a certain perspective. So I think the spacecraft that's the furthest away from Earth is maybe the Voyager spacecraft, the one which has that golden disk with all the things, the artifacts of Earth, and we're still receiving data from that spacecraft. But it's not like we have a camera aboard that spacecraft and we're able to see everything that spacecraft is seeing. So really, like, can you imagine if you sent a camera or a telescope, to the edge of the Milky Way, and you were looking back, at the Milky Way from a different perspective? I mean, it would be remarkable. All the things that we take for granted, or all the worldviews that we hold to be true, would be completely put into question if you looked at things from a different perspective. So
I think the instruments that we use to see the world, so these are images of their transcriptions, right? They're veils on reality they're like shadow, like puppet theater or something. Right. We get a sense of what's there, and the different screen will show a different image, different color, different texture. Yeah. So this is it, and so back to this idea of subjectivity. So an indexed subjectivity, like one that is acknowledged, is more objective than any other kind of perspective, because you're acknowledging the point of view, and there you go. So then it becomes, so who is that guy? What class, what income, what was his religion, these things become part of your data set to understand the world. Right. And then you can go and look at another guy, another girl, another person, and gather your perspectives, right? Yeah. So each one is fully dressed if you like. Whereas the objective perspective is undressed, it's hidden. It's
Right.
kind of, or rather the other way around, it's veiled. Veiled in objectivity, which is a kind of mask. So this is the difficulty, I think. The norms of today, the idea of research, its objectivity is really important to produce knowledge. But actually, I think you can say yes to that, but then you have to start defining what objectivity is. And then you can include subjectivity within the frame of objectivity and say that perhaps it's the pinnacle of objectivity. To acknowledge subjectivity is the pinnacle of objectivity. So yeah, so that's kind of like an apology for the Cowboy Project as well, right? It's my family. The whole thing is my family. They look. In fact, my cousin asked me. My cousin-in-law, she asked me after had a big show that the Singapore Biennale is probably the biggest outing for the Cowboy Project.
Right.
I was part of that, and that was that was big for the region. That's pretty big, successful. But she asked me after coming to the show.
Isn't that like one of the highest forums like in
Asia as a venue? Well, definitely in Southeast Asia, that's the place. But I think even as a whole in Asia, you could say that's one of the big venues, right? Like the Venice Biennale for the world. I think for Asia, you can say Singapore Biennale is pretty up there, right? But there are others, it's definitely not, there are older venues, there are others, but it's an important hub, especially for my work, because Malaysia, Singapore, Southeast Asia, I'm coming out from there. So it was important recognition for the Cowboy Project. And it happened very fast, right? I started the project in 2013. The first series was done published in 2015. And, I think the Biennale was 2017 or 2016. I was in it, right? So that was very fast for the Cowboy Project. And I was quite on a high then. Since then, things have gone quiet again. And, it's hard. Artist life is hard, right? It's like to keep it up, to keep up the level of recognition is, you got to understand certain things that it's not going to always be there necessarily for you, maybe for somebody else,
Right.
The important thing is to do what you want to do. But anyway, so my cousin asked me, Ranjan, who's going to buy your work? It's all like your family photos. Who's going to go and put it on their wall? How are you ever going to sell this stuff? And it looks like our family album, right? So I had to think about that. I said, it's true. Nobody is going to buy it like that, right? It's going to have to be an institutional collection or a collector that is really like collecting art. They're not going to buy it because they like it. You might buy a Jackson Pollock because you're very rich and you'd like it in your living room, but you're not going to buy a Cowboy Project piece for that reason.
Well, you never know. You
never know.
I mean, honestly, like maybe 150 years, 100 years from now, people will look at your work and say, "Oh my God, this is high art." I want it'll become a status symbol.
Yeah.
And then you'll think to yourself, oh fuck, what happened to this project that was uncollectible, or that nobody wanted. Suddenly it's transmuted into this whole different kind of object, because really
I believe I believe that is the way to practice art. That especially, it depends a lot on your medium, right? So if you're a painter that's producing from the hand, you can't think like this, because when you're dead, it's gone. Right. But with a photographic edition, you can think like this. It's an edition of 10, you make it, and you haven't even sold one, you've just got the artist proof out, and you're gone. But if you set it up properly, and you have people that might have interest in your work, to support it for a while, yes, then it might pick up later. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. You're dead and gone anyway, right? But the point is, I think for me, the point is to not worry about the time frame of a lifetime for the success of the work. Point one. Yeah. Point two is to give yourself the space without worrying about success, not ignoring success, right? I'm not saying that. I mean, you must work to be seen. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you won't be seen. So
Yeah.
you must do some stuff for that, but
Although,
not worry.
although to toil in obscurity is it seems like it seems like something that many artists have had to go through, and
Yes, and it becomes like a badge of honor. It's
yes,
Van Gogh, he didn't sell hardly anything, and then now look at it. But I don't even think that is cool. I think the
no,
thing is to create the space around yours. And Van Gogh did this. All these great artists, they did it one way or the other. Create the space around yourself to make the work that you think should be made.
yes,
And for some work, making and showing are the same thing. You can't, like, you can make, Van Gogh could paint and send it to his brother, and and it not be seen, right? But some kind of interactive works, performance works, you have to do it. You have to be seen, but you don't have to get famous. You don't have to be in top gallery. You
yeah,
can just do it in the community center and have it, connected. The point is, for me, all of those are fine, right? The thing is to be doing the right work that makes sense for your paradigm.
right.
So I've actually got a few pieces, right? Like little, like I've defined my work quite carefully, and I'm developing it slowly with this kind of idea. So one is the Cowboy Project. I have another photographic series, which is much more conceptual and abstract. It's really, they look like product shots of objects. That's it. To be simple, to be simple about it, they're just single objects against the seamless, backdrop, and that's it. So this is like more serious work than the Cowboy Project for me. I've been actually working on this since my days at Goldsmiths College, since the 90s. This is a long-term project, and it's actually done. I've actually created it and I have it in storage. I'm not even struggling to show it now. I'm just waiting for the right moment. But it's actually printed, massive pieces printed, created, and waiting for me to look at them, to get them out there. And COVID is not a good time to go to try to show new work if you're not already known.
yes.
Especially material work, physical work. So it has to wait a bit more than I thought, I think. But it's okay, I'm just figuring out other ways to build the environment for it. And the main work is the Cowboy Project now, get the Cowboy Project going, keep it moving.
Well, and so I guess that would lead us to kind of the idea of how do you stay true to the ethos of your work, or the logos or the pathos of your work. Like how do you retain the purity? Um, how do you stay true to the intention of the work? Um, so like you know like let's say you're trying to distill something, let's say you're trying to make a particular kind of liquor, and and depending on what kind of casks you use to mature it in, and of course the starting material, the quality of the ingredients. So if you were to translate this into art, whether it's performance art, whether it's a photograph, whether it's a painting, whether it's a sculpture, how do you take the raw materials and then create a refined product that does a good job of showing the
That's a very good, nice question, but it's actually not very easy to answer in a general way. I think there'll be many different ways to do this.
so then for your so then I
From
guess
my,
more
yeah,
specific
for me,
for your work,
yeah.
how do you and especially, like, I'm interested in these shots, these shots of these objects that you're taking. How do you, what's the process there, what's the
Well, yeah. Okay, so now I went to Goldsmiths College in 91 or something, 92, 91. I think I finished in 93. I did a master's there, right? Which is not the Goldsmiths was the center of the Europe, well, a center in the world, the art scene. But it wasn't the old guys doing the master's program. It's the young guys in the undergraduate program. They were, the Damien Hirsts and that whole push had just happened. And I didn't have an undergraduate degree in art. I'd done law and economics, and I'd given all that up, and been in London for a few years making my paintings, and moved on a little bit to installations, and realized I was much more theoretical than a maker by hand.
Right.
And so I found out about the Goldsmiths Masters, and kind of naively, really, I didn't really understand that Goldsmiths was this amazing hub. I applied and I got in. 14 people. I got in without an undergraduate degree. And I had really, somehow connected with important people. I had a reference from Sarat Maharaj to get in. That's an really important player in the London art scene. I heard about him. I invited him to my show, and that kind of just like that, right? And actually, he didn't even make it to the show, but it was a very conceptual show. So I sent him the package. There was posters and texts and so on. So I sent him all that stuff, and he was quite impressed and very kind and generous with his reference. And then I was fortunate enough that Jean Fisher, another really important person, was very much on the outfield of the mainstream art world, much more a global perspective, and a critical perspective, theory perspective. She was teaching for a short window at Goldsmiths. So she was one of the people selecting. So it's luck, right? It's all luck. So when they came to my studio, she was there to interview me. And so I think if she hadn't been there, I don't really fit in that Goldsmiths kind of ethos, right? So I got in. And I got in.
That's amazing. And see, you're absolutely right. Like having the right reference, or or even just the right person on the committee or on the board is really, I mean, it's the difference. It's the difference between being accepted and not accepted. And it's quite interesting because I wanted to study at OCAD, and I wanted to study curating of performance art, and they actually, I got a reference from Christian Bernard Singer, and a couple of other, people who are, recognized in their fields. And so when I went to, OCAD, and I said, look, I'm not a visual artist. I'm like, my primary medium is music and sound, and I want to study performance art curation. They said, well, we can't do anything for you because you're not a visual artist, and OCAD is a school for visual artists and graphic designers. So we can't do anything for you. And so I was a bit shocked because really, like, to limit art, to just a visual practice is, I think, is it seems so antiquated. But at the same time, I mean, that's their criterion, that's their standard. They say if you don't have some sort of visual art practice, then what are our professors going to teach you?
Mm.
and so maybe an institution like Goldsmiths College is the right place if I'm looking to study curating and performance art, because they seem to have
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was the pitch. Maybe it was a kind of misunderstanding, because from my perspective, the whole point about the visual arts is that it was the one art that broke all the boundaries and said it was everything else as well, right? So a lot of sound art, performance art, all comes out, film, video art, all comes out through the visual frame.
That's
So
right.
I'm a little bit surprised at that gap, but maybe it's the way you pitched it, or maybe something else. But if it truly was that they only take people with a clearly visual practice, I find that very limiting.
It is.
Because a lot of visual art is not visual, literally. It's not visual. It's moved out of there and back and forth, and it's done a lot of circuits around all of that. And the most interesting performance work comes from visual artists.
Certainly.
But of course, they're different from music performances. But yeah. So back to my own practice. So at that time, I found myself completely enthralled by the Goldsmiths methodology, because it was highly theoretical.
Yes.
We had amazing study program where, you know, we have weekly presentations, we have by ourselves, we have weekly guest speakers, the best people around in all kinds of that post-structuralist and, you know, contemporary, this is talking about the 90s, right?
Yeah.
And then we had studio visits. Each of us had to have a studio, and then we present our works to each other, like the group. It's like a cohort. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can invite about 4, 5, 6 people a year, important people in the Goldsmiths network that you want, or you can find your own to come and visit and talk to you, and you write reports. So I had Terry Atkinson, Rashid Areen. I had, you know, art in ruins. You know, I had all these crazy, some of them, you know, you won't even remember now, but they were amazing, amazing people that I got to choose, you know, come and visit me in my studio. And I gained so much, but I also learned that I wasn't that kind of artist. I wasn't looking for a gallery profile. I thought I was, but I kind of instinctively felt there was no fit. So a lot of my work ended up coming into the Goldsmiths idiom to critique it. And a lot of the hardcore Goldsmiths people were kind of like, you know, what is this guy up to? You know, like, I think I had to fight to pass, you know, because at the end of the day, my work was not material. I think Goldsmiths uses immaterial to produce material. Goldsmiths line is product line. Right. It's actually business model. You know, they're fantastic at using theory to produce an art product. Right. And a signature. Goldsmiths is a signature school. And I was I didn't understand, but this was happening. It was happening. I was completely against it. So I did many different things. I refused to build into one finished, you know, I did like so many different things.
But that's really interesting. That's really interesting because you see, you're not. I mean, it's quite subversive actually what you did, you know, because you're not. I mean, you're kind of flipping what they do on its head. You know, you're saying actually, for me, it's about using the materials that are produced to generate theory and theoretical concepts. It's not the other way around. And so you know, some people might say, oh, your process is backwards, but I actually think the way that you think about your work and about other people's work is the way forward, you know, because especially with the internet now, you know, this idea of things being important is just less and less, you know, relevant. Now I like to think of myself as a collector of ideas, or even a connoisseur of ideas rather than of objects, you know. And so some people won't understand that, but I think that's really the way that art is going to be thought about in the future, because instead of being about objects, it's going to be about experiences. The art of the future is all about experiences. So how do we create experiences? And the way that people will live their artistic visions is by experiencing them.
That's really nice. The way you live your artistic life. That is it. I mean, that is the artist. You know, some of us will be famous. Like from my cohort, Fiona Banner, I think is the biggest name, like from my 14 at Goldsmiths. Fiona Banner is big, right? I think she's the biggest of our group. And some of us are completely, you Google them, you can't find them, you know? And so it's like, but the question is, are they living their true artistic life? Like, could the famous one be doing stuff that's driven by the market as opposed to her own search? Right. Could the one that's not been seen by anybody be actually making work that's really satisfying and important? And you know, we can't even find on the internet. Never mind, he doesn't care, she doesn't care. So it's like, to me, yes, there's the outside part, which is important. You can't really ignore it. Because part of making work is having it seen by many people. There's no doubt about that. Making it in a dark room and shutting the door on it's not there, you know? So yes, you must try to be seen, but that shouldn't be dominant, you know? So the thing is to be living.
That's not the reason, that's not the raison d'être for creating the work.
Yeah, and I think the satisfaction that you get from making your work, this is really hard, you know, it's like, it takes a long time to find this, what it is as well, right? So for me, it's come down, I think I've finally, you know, it's a long time I didn't practice art. I went off to Malaysia. I became, like more a theorist and a curator and a kind of a new media visionary. Like, I made the first internet work in Southeast Asian art, like
Yes.
obviously not that amazing. It's all post World Wide Web type stuff. We didn't have any internet before that. So
Yes,
it's
it's
not,
failure of Marcel Duchamp and Japanese fetish even.
yes. Yeah, so my work moved from the goldsmiths, sort of the dematerialization of the goldsmiths model, because I really see myself as a goldsmiths person, because everything I learned is from that mix, but I had a different output than what they saw as valid, right? So I basically, my work was becoming less material. I was making installations with texts and ideas and photographs in a way that was just like theirs, but not. It's really hard to say how I was different, but everybody there knew that it was kind of out, and different. And
so you were an outsider's insider.
I think I was, yeah. I mean, I think I only got in because Jean Fisher was there, at the time.
Right.
And Jean Fisher didn't last there. She's passed away now, sadly. She's really wonderful. And she was there I was at Goldsmiths for 2 years. I think she was there a year before I came. And she left a year before I left. So she was there for a 2-year window. And if she hadn't come to my studio visit, I think your average Goldsmiths prof would not have chosen me for that program. That's my feeling. I wouldn't know. But she was there, and she got something, right? She got a buzz of something that I was doing. And so it was like this thing that just happened to me, just like, and then I gained so much from, Terry Atkinson. I mean, these people really liked what I was doing. Right? Terry Atkinson, Rashid Areen, they came and sat in my studio and talked to me directly about my work, and, a bunch of others. And so I gained so much from that, but I took it somewhere else. So I went back to Southeast Asia, and I became a different person. I saw that what I was trying to do with physical installations happened very naturally in the World Wide Web, with hypertext and linking and text and image and and trans-geographical connections, all these things. In fact, if you look at some of the works I was trying to do at Goldsmiths, I was trying to imagine an internet, basically, like video stream live. I was kind of trying to go there, and then I landed at the most cutting edge internet scenario in Asia for 1995, 96, other than Japan. Even Singapore was behind us at this moment, like in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur and Malaysia. And my university was the first university to be built on the internet infrastructure. And we had everything, like people in England and so on would come to our university and say, what, you got all this going. And it only lasted a small window, of course. Everybody else caught up, and we wasted our opportunity in political crisis and everything. But for a while, it was happening in Malaysia, the multimedia super corridor. And I was there by chance again, I was there. And so I became this internet new media person. And I had amazing colleagues. Hasnul Jamal Saidun was my buddy, partner in crime at the University of Malaysia, Sarawak. And we did some really good work. So I became more like a theorist, and I made a few pieces, important pieces. One of them's in the National Gallery collection, Malaysia. So it's like I just did a few things. I was happy. Then I curated, I wrote, I theorized, and I was really happy not doing my art actually for the longest time. And only in 2013 I said, okay, I got to go back to it. And the stuff that I had done at Goldsmiths with the objects, that was preserved and carried around the world. And I have a storage full of objects even here and now. And I work with these objects like, they're like artifacts of my, they're kind of archaeology of my consciousness through material objects from the outside world.
That's a beautiful way of putting it.
And so I preserve them like they're really important, but they're mostly junk. They're mostly just junk that you can find yourself again if you wanted something similar. But these objects, these are the ones that I found, that I've kept, I've photographed, and I've photographs that I took in the 90s, in the pre-digital era, were now post-processed in the digital era to produce the final works for this series. So it's a long arc. It's a long arc. And yeah, I'm kind of nervous about these works because I've invested everything in it, and they're massive. It's a big project. And I'm kind of scared to show them, actually. Yeah,
So
but they're there. They're done. They're done.
They're massive physically and psychologically.
Yeah, physically, like, you know, there's one series of 9 prints that's I think, what is it, 4 foot by 4 foot prints, more or less. I think, yeah. Oh, yeah, and the other series is like 5 foot by 6, 7 feet, one single print, you know. And that's massive, right? That's really massive. Chromogenic prints, digitally post-processed light jet chemical prints. So it's kind of old school. It's like, you know, old school, new school, old school, new school, old photos, old images, new prints. It's like a long span. And it's a lot to do with the realization of a figure against the ground,
right,
in the medium. So it's a lot to do with the film grain, and when the object, you know, comes into being in the medium, right? It's like little obsessive stuff that, you know, I spent so much money working on post-production because I'm not a technical person. And anyway, it's beyond, you know, you've got to be really a professional in that field to do the stuff that I want. So we worked and worked and worked on the color, on the grain, on the scan. You know, for one piece, the scan alone cost me 1,000 Canadian dollars.
Wow.
So this is kind of like really, really obsessive, and unlike the Cowboy Project, which is much more like, you know, slam bam, let's do it kind of thing. This is very, very, very meticulous and precise.
And it's something you've invested a lot of time and effort and financial resources into.
Yeah, I mean, financial more than anything else. It's my kind of like my life's work. So that's the main investment.
So
and
would you consider it then your greatest work, or like your magnum opus, or would
kind of, I guess that's what it's becoming. I've actually, I'm sure that there's potential for more, but I don't think I'm going to live another 30 years to make a piece that percolated for 30 years. You know what I mean? It's like this is the span. It's like when you're 60, more or less. I'm 60. It's kind of different already. The world, you know, you see the world differently, kind of looking back a bit.
Yeah.
But as before, you know, it was all like up there. And your question was, how do you make something that, you know, that maintains the integrity, right? That was your starting question. So I had a theory from all these studio visits and so on. One of my notes that I kept was an idea of the ready-made. Basically, a lot of my work, it's an extension of Duchamp's wonderful ready-made solution for art. The 20th century has basically been the ready-made again and again and again and again after Duchamp. And so my idea was, again, like what I said about the gesture of conceptual art, that yes, it's wonderful first time round, but once it's been done, it's already the same as an old master oil painting, because it's already designated as art and collected, and it signifies straight away.
It's been done.
It's been done, but it's gained the veneer. So you can't say it's more radical anymore than an oil painting. Right. It's the same. It's just art. It's a different way to make art now. Right.
It's become in a certain it's acquired the pretension that we were trying to get, that you were trying to get away from.
That's right. It's become conventional. It's become the old guard. It's one of the, you know, it's joined the pantheon. Right.
That's right.
It's one of the, you can't sit there doing conceptual art on sketchy pieces of paper and think yourself somehow more advanced than a guy that does oil painting and academic drawing.
Right.
It's all art already.
It's been done.
It's been done. It's been done. It's a technique. It's a means. It's a path. Are you a Buddhist? Are you a Hindu? Which one? Choose. You can't say this is, it's not a new religion anymore. It's not a new,
Like Scientology was, you know, when it was first conceived, when it was first invented, people, well, of course, I mean, you know, is Scientology going to last another 1,000 years? if human beings are around in 1,000 years, which I highly doubt. But like if Scientology lasts 1,000 years, and people are like, I can't believe somebody invented Scientology who literally said, I'm gonna make a religion and make money out of it, and then made the religion, and people actually bought into it, as something that was real. And it's the same way when I look back at other religions. It's like when people talk about dogma, and they talk about things that make no sense, and suddenly, you look at the historical context, and you see that this has been done over and over and over again. Like Islam is recycling the concepts of Judaism, and Christianity is recycling the concepts of Judaism. And everybody's like, oh, these are the three monotheistic faiths, and you read the Quran, and suddenly it's like, wait a minute, all this material was articulated in the Old Testament. And where does the Old Testament come from? Well, the Old Testament draws from other places. So it's like everything is basically plagiarized. So this idea of being original, it's almost a fallacy, because we don't
No, so this is beautiful, because this is the principle of the traditional school. And like I've been struggling with this other dimension to my worldview that doesn't quite fit the modern perspective. And again, like, I think what you're saying, I'm not orthodox in one traditional dogma either, right? So I'm not a Hindu that will say that is the way that will get me to heaven and everything else doesn't matter. I'm not. But at the same time, I've been brought up in that religion, and I practice it to some small extent. And I understand its concepts to a much higher extent. Mainly, I live in the modern world. I'm more interested in modern ethics and modern ontology than anything that the religion offers. So, how do I balance all of that? And from quite a young age, I've been reading the works of Ananda Coomaraswamy, who is one of the 3 or 4 important writers in what's known as the traditional school. And this is a kind of school of metaphysics that sets itself apart from the modern ethos, right? So they came at the turn of the century. It was a little bit anti-colonial in that, they were validating traditional forms from other cultures other than Western culture. So there's a little bit of railing against the modern world, to quote to Guénon, to paraphrase Guénon. And so Ananda Coomaraswamy, René Guénon, Sean, and Syed Hussein Nasr, who is still alive. Like he's in America. I think he's still writing and working. So these people have a way of looking at it, which is that this idea of plagiarism, originality, and so on. When you look at religions, it's all the same information, the same knowledge, passed through different prophets, different windows, different filters, right, to different communities. Yeah. It's not important which came first, where it came from. The thing is, it's the truth.
Yeah.
And the truth is abstract, and it's metaphysical, and it's universal. Yes. Right? Different windows to the same truth. Yeah. And science also can participate. You can see that the cosmos is the same, whether you look at it through physics or through a Hindu model, and there'll be differences. Yes. Right? So then there'll be doctrine. So what they say is, choose one, stick to it, practice properly, but understand that the window is to the same truth behind. Right. Right. So don't mix everything. So don't, because then you have no shape, no form.
But then see, then that begs the question of, how do you determine what's empirical and what's not? And I think in this part is more of a scientific notion than it is a religious notion.
Yes. So empiricism is the truth of facts, right? It's like it's to do with what you can measure, what you can touch, what you can observe in the physical world mostly. But like I said earlier, if you tweaked it a little bit, the internal world, the spiritual world, is also susceptible to empirical inquiry, in that you can observe it and you can test it. Right? Yes. And you just have to be open to the internal research. And then there are communities of people practicing these things. Yes. There are people who get high together, literally on ganja, or on sermons. They get high together. It's a fact.
Yes.
You know, you can put brainwaves, and if you want to get empirical, you can measure what's happening, and they have, right? The Buddhist meditators who meditate lifelong, their brains have changed, right? They have changed. So in that sense, it can be turned into empirical, but it doesn't need to be.
Right.
I think the thing is to inquire intellectually and morally and spiritually.
Yes.
And I think it's important to settle on something, more or less, and sort of practice it, right? Like, I think I'm saying sort of because I'm pretty wishy-washy in practice, right? But but I think when I see people who, you know, do their 5 times a day prayer or whatever, I think, yes, that's the way. That you can be as modern as you want, but do your ritual, do your thing. Get up, put the flowers, pray to the deity, do it. You don't have to believe that in a superstitious way, but the ritual gets you in the groove.
Right.
It creates the reality that relates to all the other values, if you abide by those other values of the religion.
Yes.
And I think it helps. I think it helps. So I don't do it yet. You know, I've got some time. I can change. I would like to be more involved in spiritual practice, even if it's meditation, you know, as opposed to ritual. Even that would be fine. But the last thing I'd like to say about that whole thing is that in the Hindu way of looking at it, everybody has their own path. It's based on their nature. So for some, it's devotion and worship. For others, it might be intellect, right? So just inquiry and intellection could be a path to this realization. You don't need to do the other bits. Or for others, it could be just doing your duty, like you're a soldier and you fight and you kill, but you do it with a pure heart and you do it bravely and honestly, or you do service to the poor and you do it, you know, selflessly with no, this is another path, right? So there are different ways. We don't all have to do the same way.
Right. And it wouldn't make sense for us to all do it the same way.
No, yeah. So these, and art is a way too. Art is a way, I think. Could be a way.
Sure. And I mean, a lot of times when people ask me, you know, what's your religion? And I respond with music, you know, people will say, oh, but really, how can music be a religion? And my response is that I'm devoted to music in the same way that, you know, a monk or you know, a Christian monk would be devoted to God, you know, in this, or Jesus Christ. Like, to me, there's just as much passion, there's just as much, you know, devotion, you know, and I've sacrificed just as much in order to realize my musical, you know, path, and in order to get things done, you know. And you know, I was speaking to an artist who's quite quite unknown to a lot of people. He also makes guitars. He's a luthier, and you know, I said to him, you know, your guitars are works of art. And he said, you know what, I wouldn't call my guitars works of art. And I said, why not? And he said, because, you know, I measure art, or I would call something art based on the amount of sweat and blood that went into making it, you know. So I don't really consider my guitars works of art. I thought that was interesting, that actually the qualifier for what makes something art is the amount of effort or the amount of pain that one has to go through in order to realize that work, you know. And I'm not saying that's the only measurement. I'm not even saying that that's the most accurate measurement. But according to this artist, that was his measurement of art, and I thought that was interesting, you know. Um, and so that's, and bringing that back to the religious idea, you know, when you're religious, when you're devoted to something, you have that kind of, you know, you put that ideal, or that you know, that concept above everything, sometimes even above your own life. Like, for example, in the Ismaili tradition, there are these people called fidais, and they were people that were willing to give up their life for the imam, you know. So they're putting that ideal or that cause above their own life. um so so I'm not saying that all artists are going to put their art at such a, you know, at such a level, or they're going to be so devoted to their practice. But the people that are, the people that put their life on the line, you know, and it's like life or death for your art, you know, that kind of devotion, you know, that seems to me to be equivalent to anybody's religious practice.
I think so, and I think we recognize that in even in a naive way, society recognizes that. For instance, one thing I've realized as an artist and as a human being is that there's a compromise between the other aspects of my life and my art. Right? So I'm married, I have two kids, I have my parents, I have responsibilities, I have fulfilled some of those, and I've experienced things other than my art, and sometimes those things have been more important than my art. And for me, it's been about kind of like a balance. I'm sure that if, you spoke to my family, they'd say, "Oh my God, living with Ranjan and his art is like too much." But at the same time, I've maintained ties and I've been responsible with my family at the expense of my art, right?
Right.
But if you look at the real amazing, some of the most amazing artists, and you look at their other aspects of their life, their responsibility to children, to their women, their partners, their environment. So some of them are pretty obnoxious, in the sense that not for its own sake, but because they were in their quest. In their quest, everything else faded away.
Yes.
Everything becomes material for the art. Everything is secondary to the art. And these people, even though they're such horrors in their lives, we respect them because we recognize what you just said, that art is something that important, that ethically it might be not sound, but somehow spiritually we recognize that for society it was worth it, what this guy, all the shit that he did to produce this art, because it
Right.
means so much. There's
Right.
so many people like this, so many artists like this, even in pop music, people like this, right?
And it's like like if a monk decides to devote 40 years of their life meditating in a cave, how are they benefiting society? How are they being
Yeah,
quote unquote responsible members of society? Well, I guess we really have to examine the criteria upon which we make these distinctions, upon which we predicate these distinctions. Because at the end of the day, if we measure everybody by the same criteria or by the same standards, we're doing a disservice, to society. Because we need all these people. We need that monk who has devoted 40 years of his life to meditating in a cave. We need we need the housewife who's devoted herself to raising her children, because that those children are you know going to contribute to society in other ways. And so when people say, oh, that genius thinker was worth much more than a housewife, I like to question that. I like to say, no, actually I don't think that's true. Because each person that plays a role in the creating of the society is important. Yeah, you can't say everybody's of equal importance. Like some chess grandmaster who spent 30 years of his life playing the game of chess. you know um you know are they as important as I don't know, like Neil Armstrong, for example. I don't know, like when you look at uh these kinds of comparisons or distinctions, it starts to become absurd. I think it's a kind of absurdism, because uh I don't think it's okay, or I don't think it's right to compare these things. I think all of these levels of varying degrees of importance, they're sort of made by society, but also made by the individual, because you decide in a way how important you are, and then of course it's the other people in your life, other people in your community, other people in society who decide how important you are. And so when at the end of the day, when you're gone, the legacy that you leave, it's not so much what you thought about yourself. It's the work that you leave behind that will speak on your behalf. So whether that's a child, whether that's your artwork, whether that's whatever, there's certain ways you can leave behind something tangible, or
yeah,
even something intangible, something like an idea. Ideas like, for example, Plato. We cannot think about Western philosophy without thinking about Plato. But at the same time, when you look at where Plato's ideas came from, you have to look at Socrates, and Socrates, and his dialogues with Plato form, what you would consider, a large part of the work. It's the same thing as Rumi and Shams of Tabriz. When people think about Rumi, they don't often think about Shams of Tabriz, but really, a lot of a lot of Rumi's poetry is probably stuff that Shams said, or stuff that was inspired by Shams. So, uh, so I think we can leave ourselves in tangible and intangible ways, and I like the idea that we aren't defined so much by what society or what we think of ourselves, but we're sort of defined more by what we how we affect other people, and how we affect the landscape that we are a part of,
Yeah, and it kind of all that ties up with this idea of originality, continuity, the idea that there's only one truth, or the idea that, like in the West, it's so important to be original.
or to be an
Like
individual.
even if we teach our students to be original, not to plagiarize. Research has to be new knowledge. Everything has a copyright patent. Does it deserve that? But in the traditional way, we just like learn, memorize, and practice.
Imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
just there's some very interesting flashpoints on this, like examples that can elucidate. I remember, George Harrison's "My Sweet Lord," right? I think he got into legal trouble because it was something else, it was another tune, and I think he lost the case. I might be getting the songs wrong, but I think it was "My Sweet Lord." And his position was, I think he kind of recognized the melody that he had appropriated, but he said he did it unconsciously, right? Oh yeah, yeah. But actually, as an artist who's practiced for 30 years, right, more, I now see so many cases where I've done it myself. So like you're working with some people and you think you're the, guru or the senior, the older one, and they're all like learning from you. And then, 2 years later, you've done stuff and they're still like looking at your stuff and at your feet, so to speak. And then you look at your own stuff carefully and say, oh shit, this stuff he was doing when he was talking to me before, I must have picked it up as a vibe of my student, not my student, but the person that was looking up to me,
right. Right.
And so, and even recently, I've done these podcasts and stuff in the course of writing that paper that I sent you about prediction, potentiality and prediction.
Yes.
And I've had this discussion with a guy called Derek Robinson, and he's amazing, and we're both sort of in the same zone about stuff. And I finished my writing after the conversation, and because it was recorded, I have the evidence, right? So I use a turn of phrase. When speaking about Yeats. Yeats's 13th cone, the interpenetrating cones, which is the diagram at the top of the paper.
Yes.
And I say it's the quintessential post-traditional conceit. And I'm really proud of myself for that little phrase. I checked what conceit means in the dictionary and said, yes, that's right, I got it right. And I was really happy with that. And then I go back and I watch the videos, and there's Derek saying, that's what that those cones were Yeats's fundamental conceit. And I say, oh shit, that's where I got it. It wasn't original. So like life is full of that, right? So we're taking all the time.
Yes.
And like if you look at all the Western philosophers, right? Schopenhauer to Nietzsche, to whatever. If you really try to break it down to what it is, hey, the Buddha said this already, man. This is like the Hindu one. What are they saying? Saying in different language only. Just change the accent and it's ours. It's like, but they don't recognize it, or they are hiding the fact that.
Or even African spirituality. Like a lot of people don't realize, but like when you look at, or when you look at some of the oldest known things about man, like and if that theory that we all come from Africa is true, then then you look at the modern era, and you look at all the different tribes, and if you really like think about their spirituality, then you can see echoes of that in all of the world's traditions, even in rhythm. Like, for example, the idea of layering rhythms on top of each other, polyrhythms, that's inherently from the African tradition of music. You see that everywhere. You see that in Indian music, you see that in jazz, you even see it in the postmodern classical tradition, and suddenly, when somebody uses a polyrhythm, people are like, oh, that's so cool, that's so avant-garde. And I'm like, like, really, you think this is avant-garde? This is as old as time. This is, this comes from like the most ancient of places.
Yeah,
uh
I think I saw it on your Facebook, that Brazilian thing where those guys are doing drumming on the river, on the water. Was
yeah,
that your thing? Yeah.
yeah,
Isn't that
that
amazing?
was yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so things are there, right? So like if you look at pharmaceuticals and the traditional herbal remedies and medicines, and so many things now are taken from people who are happy to give it away, taken by people who want to own it, and then they're modified a bit, and then they put a patent on it, and then they sell it back, and it's kind of like, I have a book by Ananda Kumarasamy in which instead of a copyright statement, it says clearly anybody can take anything from here and you use it how you want, really, because all knowledge, that's the traditional school principle, all knowledge is already known. We're just re-knowing it in our own selves.
That's correct.
And it's already, the old people knew. You think that the people who built the pyramids knew less than us when we send a rocket to the moon? I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think the people in the forest who have lived a balanced ecological life for centuries without having to progress, so to speak, you think they know less than us? I don't think so. I wish we could learn what they know about balance.
That's right.
So it's like, it's just the same stuff coming back and back and back, and usually getting worse, not better, right?
So it's all, I mean, so in a way, it's all like a game, and part of the game is when you're born, well, if being born is a choice, then you're born. I think part of the agreement is that you come as a blank canvas, as an empty slate, because this idea of a being that's all knowing or all powerful. I mean, that it's sort of, it's kind of the antithesis of being human, because that's the idea of, this is God, this is what's beyond us. But really, when you look at all of the sum of all collective knowledge that is human, I mean, it would probably, be equivalent, or at least close to equivalent, of this idea of a supreme creator or supreme being, because if human beings invented the concept of God and the concept of religion, we were looking at ourselves and thinking, okay, so what's beyond us? And so it was at the furthest realms of our imagination that we thought about this all-knowing creator. But like you said, knowledge, we're just relearning all the stuff that we already know. So if it's possible in theory to know everything, then you'd be done. Then what more is there? What more is there? So I think the process of letting go, unlearning, of being a blank slate, I think this idea of newness, even the idea of something being new, is just, it's like a game. It's like
Yeah.
chess. It's like chess, or even like music, like you have these rules, you have these, even like laws of nature that arrange things in a certain way, and we are just relearning that which we already knew. Because really, if you follow your instinctually, you know all these things. It's then when I'm getting lost in a ramble, but I think,
No, you're doing good. You're doing good. I think the idea that we know already, it's a really important idea, and it's a very difficult idea, but I see that in terms of the stuff I've been studying a lot, in terms of this metaphysical idea that the totality is embedded in the particularity.
Mhm.
The universality is here, right? So if you talk, it's easier to talk in terms of time, that eternity is present and patent in the experience of time.
Yes.
So in eternity, and it's like a misunderstanding of religion to say, God created the earth in 7 days or something. It's a metaphor that's quite often misunderstood.
Yes.
What was he doing before then? Right? This is not me. This is like famous Christian theologians have asked
Yes.
critically. So what was he doing before? No, God is creating the world now. That is what God is. It's now and it's forever.
Yes.
It's now and there's no end to it. It's forever. And we are passing through that experience, getting that experience as time. But at any moment, you can open yourself to the totality.
Yes.
And awareness. At least we can get a sense of it. Not really understand it, but you can get a sense of it, like the completeness of it. And sometimes maybe these little oddities like deja vu, people who can prophesy, whether it's true or not, right? Let's not argue about it. But people who read astrology,
right?
Is it that there are windows, there are little blips in the continuity of time that allow certain people or certain expertise to see the whole picture? Right. The whole picture means everything has happened already, right? I mean, it's not even, you can't even have language for it, which means the future is known, the past is known, everything is done, and it's going on at the same time as being done.
That's right.
If there is such a thing, and there are many clues in your own experience, it's just that we ignore it because we want to be in the here and now. There's always sometimes, hey, have I been here before? And we say, oh no, it's just like, it's like some other place. That's why it looks the same. Or there's these weird things that we do all experience that we put aside because we're just, continuing in this conscious stream of now, of the present, right?
And it's like, it's like, you could call the experience transcendental, or you could call it, an experience of seeing beyond or being beyond the being beyond the human experience. But really, like these things happen, like, even the idea of sleep, for example, when you're asleep and when you're dreaming, it's like some people would argue that the dream is not reality, but it is reality because it's happening.
Reality.
It is happening, so it's like the physical universe and everything that's in it and everything that we interact with is a kind of framework that we're interacting with. It's a series of rules, of checkpoints, like if you were to step in front of a car and the car hit you, physically you would die, but and so like there's checkpoints, like your body is, if you're if out of self-preservation, you're not going to step in front of a car unless you're suicidal. But you know what I mean? Like there's these rules.
No, I get it. But the thing is,
like there's an action and consequence, or there's cause and effect. But really, if you think about it, all these things that we're arguing have already happened, that are in the process of happening, and the future. If we superimpose all of that together, and then all of those wave packets collapse, then that's what you call reality. So things exist in the quantum state until the reality resolves itself. But I think that's even that's a fallacy, because everything's always in a quantum state. Even when it resolves itself, all those possibilities still continue to exist.
Yeah. So
they might not be materialized, they might not be actualized, but they're still there.
No, but the sleep thing, right? Because you covered so many things there. There's a few things I want to respond to. The sleep thing. I mean, there are many cultures in which that sleep is construed differently. The dream space is construed differently, right? And even in the Hindu idea, the living world is a kind of semi-dream state. It's a maya. It's a relative reality. It's not an illusion, but it's all relative. So the dream, the waking world, right? And I just, again, the internet is so full of all kinds of stuff, but an amazing image came by with the slogan recently, where it's a picture of, I think it's Maasai, African tradition, right? So I think it was Maasai looking, and the description explained that in this tribe, in this culture, when the children are born, the parents don't look after them for 2 or 3 years. They give them to the grandparents for the first 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And only then they take them. And the reason is the old people need the information from the young people who just came because they're going. They need the communion with the people who just came, so
Right.
they know what's coming. And they need it. We don't need it. We are in this world, but the babies just came and the old people are getting ready to go.
Right.
So I mean,
So
that's so,
exits and entries.
yeah, and that's so counterintuitive to the material idea that when you hit the car and die, that's finished. That's how we live. Even the religious people, they're just hoping for something, but the actual consciousness is like, when I die, I'm dead, right? They pray every week, but actually they don't really, really know that it's all right afterwards, that there's another place to go. They have the myth. Some believe it, some don't, some try to believe it. But there are old cultures that completely accept, like the Egyptians, they built all these tombs. The Chinese, they send paper money to their ancestors, in the other world. Who knows? Right? Who knows what it is? Is it a construct? Is it something that if you imagine it now, you can have it later? Is it a blank space of nihilism? Is there God sitting up there with a book and, this side, that side? Who knows, right? But again, the other thing I wanted to say is music, right? Music is really a useful metaphor. Actually, it's not even a metaphor. It's literally, it is it. It is an ontology. It is this thing, time and eternity. You can understand it in terms of melody and harmony. Like, so when you're listening to a lot of jazz, and I'm not very musical, like I don't have a natural ear for tones, but I've listened to a lot of music and I know my music really well. And when you're listening to jazz, right, especially because it's improvised, because there's a history, it's an evolution. Like Indian music is improvised, but there's no history because it's like eternal, right? Whereas jazz, there's these stages and evolution and styles and heroes and players that are emulated and so on, right? And so you when you're listening to a lot, you keep hearing the old fragments, right? And sometimes it's because the player is playing an old fragment, citing it, quoting it. Sometimes the player might not even know they're doing it. And the player may not even recognize it, but you as a listener is recognizing something or misrecognizing something, right? It's because this is like the intuition about eternity. It's because all the notes make a whole, right? In whatever set of notes it is. I even not sure of the terminology, but say in a key or in a chord or in a set. And the melody passes through it, and the melodies, the notes are limited, right? So people are making infinite pathways through a limited set. And once you press your hands down on all the keys on the church organ, you get eternity. You get, that's it. It's all known now. It's here. But if you want to pass through time, then you play any given sequence, any melody. So this is the sense in which I see the space between the consciousness of what's happening now, that's melodic consciousness, and the eternity is the harmonic, the harmonic totality of the sound, right? And actually it's dissonant more than anything else, because all the keys are together, right? All the harmony, all the sets are played together.
It's all happening at the same time. And
yeah.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I liked I think with the pipe organ, because you can theoretically hold the note for infinity. You're touching the texture of time. So I've created a series of pieces that are called the texture of time, side A, side B, and I'm thinking that like this idea of really touching eternity is so difficult to really put your finger on, that one of the ways that we can sort of understand that through a musical perspective is when we think about the fact that there is so many frequencies that are beyond the human ear, that are beyond what we can actually recognize as frequencies that are heard.
Yeah.
there's in the lower frequencies, there's things that are in the subsonic range, there's things that are in the infrasonic range. You can't really hear them, you can only feel them, you know. And then there's sounds that are so high you can't even hear them anymore. You know, the sounds that bats hear, you know, the sounds that are in places that we can't perceive. It's the same thing with light. You know, we can't see a whole bunch of different, you know, kinds of light. You can't see an X-ray, for example, you know, but we know that it exists, and we've created technology that, you know, that allows us to, you know, see these things that are unseeable but the naked eye. So really, when you think about eternity, you realize that either way there's infinity. You know, there's an infinite spectrum, there's an infinite set of sounds. Now imagine if you could hear all of that at the same time, like how overwhelming that would be. You know, I mean, you wouldn't even be able to call it music. It would just be chaos, you know. And
That would be the year of God.
right.
And you know, it's interesting, right? The spectrum, the idea of the spectrum, the visible spectrum,
Right.
you know, that's like, that's your reality,
Yes.
right? That's your visual reality.
Yeah.
And so, but we already know that spectrum actually continues.
Yes.
So this is important. We forget, we know it, but we live as if this is all that matters.
Well, and it's that idea, it's that false dichotomy between the definite and the indefinite, you know?
Yeah.
Because really they're one and the same. Like, it's only defined when you view it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's only real if you say it's real. I mean, it's like it sort of questions everything that we take for granted, you know? It questions the whole, like, you know, I like that word ontology, because it questions the ontology of music. When you say that, okay, you know, there's all this stuff that's beyond the range of the human ear, or even beyond the range of the human mind, you know, and suddenly, you know, it makes what we can perceive, and it makes that what we can interact with seem even more remarkable, because
And you know, yeah. So with
even within the limitations, there's really an infinity. It's like that idea that there are larger infinities and smaller infinities. Like,
yeah.
space between 0 and 1 is a smaller infinity than the space between 0 and 2, and so on indefinitely.
Yeah. And it's funny because I just having that discussion with Derek in the previous conversation about the infinity between 0 and 1 being just as infinite as the infinity, you know, in the range of integers, right? So
Yeah.
so there's infinities within infinity, micro and macrocosms, I guess.
That's right.
But I wanted to get back to music and the stuff that we're talking about, and jazz especially.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm a skeptic, right? With God, I go with him, but then I ask, you know, are you really there? And the same with everything, and even the stuff that I love, like, you know, free jazz, Coltrane, Coltrane and Don Cherry, right? You know, at Coltrane and Ornette Coleman, like. Yes. The two apostles of the apocalypse, or whatever, the horsemen of the apocalypse, one sweet and one sublime, masters of dissonance, right? And so I just love it. Like, I love a nursery rhyme, and then I wonder what's wrong. You know, is it because I've accustomed myself to this, that, you know, is it just a habituation? What is it? How is it functioning? And then there's all this theory, people analyzing Coltrane's notes, and, you know, like, using computers and figuring out like all what he's doing and his speed, and you know, but what I think is, it's something like that's idea that if all the frequencies were together, we couldn't cope, right? So that my phrase, what did I say? The year of God.
Yes.
So when Coltrane does it in those big orchestras with the dissonance, and I've seen a lot of this live too, right? In my forays into jazz, like, not by these great masters. I was too young. I wasn't in America at the time, but since then, you know, I've seen a lot in London and even in the States. Really experience the euphoria of that. You know, it's usually wind instruments, but with rhythm, and that lift what they're working with. They're working with the year of God. You know, they're giving you a sense of that other world where, you know, it's like I don't know, you wouldn't know because it's in London. It's like there's a painter called Martin. It's just like anybody who goes to the Tate would know this, you know, Tate Britain or whatever. It's a British painter who painted these massive scenes of the apocalypse, you know, like the earth falling away and people all really small, massive paintings. It's like, it's kind of hokey, but you stand in front of it and you get like, woo, you know, you get this like overwhelming, sublime sort of feeling that
it's kind of psychedelic in a way.
Yeah, it's beyond psychedelic. It's apocalyptic psychedelic, right? And so that's what they were doing. And it only worked for a window of time because it fit with the social movement, you know, the struggle that was going on, Vietnam War and you know, civil rights.
It's like theater of the absurd. Was something that came out of a particular time in a particular theater. So just like movements in art are connected to a particular time and place, you know, there's certain things like memes, for example, you know, internet memes, like that's a particular genre of dare I say art that when people look back at the 21st century or the early part of the 21st century, they're going to say this was a movement of art that came out of this particular era and it come out of this particular medium, because without the internet this would not exist. It wouldn't have a place, you know. So then is everything then tied down to a particular culture or to a particular people? You know, like you said, jazz has a tradition, it has a lineage, you know, we can trace back, you know. So okay, jazz came out of, you know, like when you look at the earliest forms of jazz, you have Dixieland, you know, and then you might say, okay, now is big band era, and now you have bebop, and you know, and then you look at somebody like Miles Davis who didn't even consider himself a jazz musician, but at the same time embodied what jazz is about, you know, which is this ethos of experimentation, this ethos of, you know, of asking questions rather than coming up with answers, you know. And so, you know, now that jazz has been institutionalized, now that people are teaching jazz at university, you know, to me it makes no sense. Like, you know, I mean, my parents want me to go to university and study jazz or study whatever I want to study. They want me to study something. And I'm asking myself these kinds of questions, like, how does my practice fit in to this academic tradition or to this scope? Like, classical music is institutionalized, you know, jazz is institutionalized, but now we have, you know, the avant-garde, the postmodern, even that is starting to be institutionalized. So what happens to the people that exist outside of that institutionalization? What happens to the people that are on the bleeding edge, you know, on the leading edge of their practice, of an artistic tradition? Like, you know, how do you contextualize something that draws from that rich and storied lineage of whether it's jazz, whether it's the French romantic tradition of being a spontaneous composer, whether that's Messiaen, whether that's you know, Dupre, whoever your heroes are, wherever the tradition is coming from, how do you put into context what you're doing if it's not, if you don't, like, how do you situate it? You know, because we're talking about how the jazz tradition is different than the Indian tradition, and that the Indian tradition is still handed down from master to apprentice, apprentice to master. You have that cycle. Well, in the jazz idiom, because jazz is so much younger than Indian music, we can actually say these are the heroes, these are the periods of jazz. But my question is then, how do we situate our practice within that institutionalization? People saying this is where this belongs. Like, you know, how you're thinking about your photography, like I'm trying to think about my music. I'm trying to think about where does it fit in, does it fit in, you know? And it's a hard question. It always these are the kinds of questions that keep me up at night, because then I'm like,
you know, I think we kind of touched on this conversation before, and this is a good point to sort of recap, like not in this session, but previously on the phone and stuff. But this idea that things have changed, you know, in terms of connoisseurship, expertise, the accreditation process has changed.
Yes.
Right. To the extent that you could even argue, in fact, people have argued seriously in academic context even, that the university is passé, right? The idea of certification is passé. The kinds of accreditation that you need are more horizontal now, not vertical, right? So peer review
Yes.
is a horizontal process that is part of a hierarchical academic process.
Yes.
Now imagine peer review without hierarchy. That's the internet. That's Facebook. That's likes. That's, you know, that's your group, your social group.
Yeah.
Giving you, and there's a lot of shit that comes through as being important, like Trump, right? I mean, that we know from the elections that he's a really important person. Half of America says so, right? And he established it through Twitter and
Yes.
so on, regardless of how crazy he is or not, right? Regardless of that, the fact is that half of America says yes.
Yes,
And
because suddenly we've democratized it to the point where literally anybody with a cell phone can claim to
yes,
be an expert on anything.
yes.
And
And then anybody with a cell phone can claim to, how do you put it, occupy the space
yes,
of accreditation. So we're all vying to be influencers now, right? That's it.
right.
And people, the old guys like me, like I have Facebook, I have a blog, you know, and I'm a pioneer of 1996, you know, Southeast Asian new media. I'm not like nobody, you know, like I really am. I mean, like when Isaiah came to Singapore, Hasnul and me had a show like to recognize, you know, I was on the board of Isaiah. I brought Isaiah to Asia. I fought to get Isaiah to go to Japan. You know, like I'm part of this thing. But actually, I'm an old fuddy duddy because I refuse to do the things that the young people do to get their stuff out there.
Right.
That's like a different idiom of validation.
Yes.
Right. I find it difficult. I don't like it.
And you know, this is funny that you bring this up because, you know, I sometimes feel like I'm completely anachronistic, that I was actually born into the wrong era, because I in a way, like yes, I'm a master of technology. Yes, technology is a huge part of my practice. But like even the keyboard that I have sitting in front of me, this keyboard only runs on floppy disks, you know? And why, you might ask, why the hell would I, you know, use a keyboard that only runs on floppy disks? But I actually find it comforting to have that limitation, you know, that and you know, to use something that other people might say, you know, why would you use this technology? It makes no sense. So I totally relate. I relate.
Afraz, I lost you there, and I think you were saying something interesting. Hey, we lost you there. You know, when you said you were anachronistic,
Yes.
and you started to explain, and then the audio really went bad. So I think you should say that again. It sounded interesting.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. So I was saying that you know, like it's bizarre that you know, I'm a child of the 21st century, but some of the equipment, some of the technology that I use is very old. Like I have a keyboard here that only runs on floppy disks, and and some people would look at that and say, that's ridiculous, that's insane. Why would you acquire a keyboard that only runs on floppy disks? But I actually find it oddly comforting to work with floppy disks, because you know, there's the limitation of space. You know, I can't just do endless amounts of stuff. Whereas when I sit down on my computer, in theory, I could sit down and make a composition that occupies a terabyte if I really wanted to. You know, and so, you know, when I only have 5 megabytes to work with, then suddenly it forces me to be creative. It forces me to you know, to
So
solve
that's really an important point about the change that has come in the new media. Because ultimately, I think I'm a media theorist. You know, a lot of my work is about, even though I don't use digital technology all the time, I have, but I'm not facile with the technology itself. Excuse me, I should plug in this computer before I lose you from this one. The most important thing is the juice. So in terms of media, right, what has happened in the course of the multimedia revolution, in the course of basically the computer becoming the platform, the canvas, is that all different mediums have become one media on the metaphor, the primary metaphor of 1 and 0. Right? And the procedure of deploying the medium, whatever it might be, is again on the metaphor of a calculation.
Right.
Right? Because a computer is called a computer because it was an abacus.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's why it's called a computer. So now our thinking process, all our mediations are done on the idiom of calculation.
Yes.
We run the numbers for the image. We run the numbers for the sound. We run it. We run the ones and zeros basically for everything.
Right.
And so it's all one medium.
Which is why some people look at well, some people don't like to have, you know, computers involved in things like the recording process. Like I have a friend of mine who insists on recording everything onto tape, and only using acoustic instruments, and then you know, and then cutting the sound onto vinyl, and you know, I don't agree with that, because of course I use computers in my practice, and I don't really, I wouldn't give up computers or the possibilities afforded to me by computers, you know. Like, I mean, I think I might have told you about this, that I'm working on developing a conceptual instrument that is basically a huge library of audiophile quality sounds, which is controlled by this massive console of 5 keyboards, which are 360 degrees. Well, that is only possible with the computer. There's no way that that instrument is possible without a computer. But at the same time, I also have keyboards that have floppy disks, or I have keyboards that are completely analog, you know, that have no computer parts, that are just circuitry, you know. And so I'm not opposed to using quote unquote technology that is no longer considered technology. Like a piano is technology. You know, a chair is technology. It's just that we've figured out how these things work. Like, we've perfected the piano, we've perfected the chair. You know, you know, and so in that sense, we don't even look at it as technology anymore. You know, but because we like to think that technology is the stuff that sort of doesn't work yet, or the stuff that has room to grow or room to improve. But at the end of the day, everything is technology. You know, even a lens is technology. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this idea of media even predates the computer. It even predates technology as we like to think of it. It predates the internet. You know, the printing press was one of the hugest revolutions in media that ever happened. I think you would agree with me. And some people might argue, oh, but that's not media. But I would say, yes, it is media. It's a form of media.
Yeah, no, of course it's media. Of course it's media. All the way from, you know, the beating of the drum to the
It's all media. Yeah.
It's all media.
Yeah.
All media.
So even things, even the first things that like cave paintings are media. You know, the Gregorian chant is media. You know, I mean, okay, so I'm the kind of person that doesn't like to be gatekeepery about things, but I know that there's an importance to put things into perspective, to make distinctions of some kind. So like, I guess with the internet and with media in its current iteration, you know, and I'm including in this things like VR technology, like virtual reality, and you know, immersive sound installations and things like that, or even like there's experiences where you can you know, there's like smells are generated, or you know, the theaters where they have the shaking of the seats, the vibration of the seats, and the, you know, the when you fall into a pool, you know, they have water splash on you. All these kinds of technologies that are immersive, quote unquote, these are the quote unquote new media. But like if you had to put media into a box, what would that box be? You know, would it be visual? Would it be oral? Would it be, I don't know, like, how do you define media? That's the question I'm trying to ask.
I think it's quite easy, actually. Like, for me, from the work that I've done, I would just step out of the technological frame and look at it from a kind of semiotic frame.
Okay.
And then you get your definition quite easily. If you go to Saussure and the signifier signified, right, the sign.
Yeah.
So if you go there, you find that the material in which the sign is embedded, is realized, right, is this signifier. And it's back to the theme of the podcast, the concept, the Platonic, the idea communicated by the material is the signified.
Right.
So anything in which you can constitute the signifier, to me, is a medium. So one of the first difficulties when you're learning this stuff is, how can speech be a medium? It's not paint, it's not, but the vibration of the air is a medium,
yes.
Right? So voice, speech is also a material signifier.
Yes.
Right? So anything like that, where you can make a signifier, is a medium. Now, then you layer on the idea of technology, and then you got more and more additive, complicated. And then you get more complicated, like now, digital, and it actually breaks it back down. It's not, and when it's broken back down.
Which is the idea of the cycle, because.
Yeah, it's the cycle of that. So now we're at this point in the cycle where it's completely broken down, where only thing left of all the old media is their artifice, is their conventionality. So you have emulatory software that allows you to make media representations that look like writing, look like painting, look like music, look like sound, look like drum, look like whatever way you want to cut it, it can look like that. The ones and zeros can sound or look like that. So now we are juggling conventions of history in our present formless universal platform. So now, this is why I find my project with the objects, not the cowboy, the objects, that
yes.
the stuff that has not been shown. I'll send you a link. I have a website for it. It's just kind of private. I'll send you some links so you can see the work since we've talked about it. So here, the idea is, look, they were shot on slide film.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they were shot on film, transparency, right? Positive film. And they're like, solid, like 8x10 negatives or positives, or, this is like super, like photography of the old times, right? Done on cameras, film cameras, and then preserved for all these years, not realized. And not realized, not because I was waiting, like, it's like in wine in a cellar or something, I was waiting for it to mature. Not realized because I got distracted, right? Like I said, I went to Malaysia, I became more interested in technology, but I preserved these. I knew these were important, and I really, really preserved them carefully.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did, because I think part of the work of an artist is to be an archivist and to be a curator of your own work.
Of your own, yeah. So, and I failed it at many instances with my own work at that, but in this case, I because it was not realized, it was preserved, right? So now we come to the present.
Ironic.
Yeah. So present era, we now have all the digital technology. We have the cameras. The Cowboy Project cannot happen without smart cameras, because basically the first series was shot by my daughter when she was she's at Ryerson. She just finished the degree in photography. So she was always going to do it, but she was 16 and it was shot on a throwaway, on a K01, I think, yeah, Pentax camera. But it's the automation doing most of the work, right? She had a good eye, and then that's how my work can happen, because photography is so easy. I don't have to bring my photographer along. I just go to a performance and say, anybody here can handle this camera? And of course, it's like a very simple Nikon D33, 100 or whatever. Just hand it over, put it on the basic settings, and I get these amazing photos. Like 3 out of 5 are super, right? So I'm relying on the technology in all my work. But in these object works, what happens is we take the old film negative and we scan them to the level required to bring up the resolution. So to do one piece, I told you I had to spend like $1,000 on the scan to get the massive scan, because the negative also was the slide was slightly damaged. We need to use gels to cover up the scratches, and it was white on white, so we couldn't hide the scratches. Like very technical stuff had to be done. But the work ultimately is about using the capacities of the new media to realize the qualities of the old media right? Which couldn't be realized in the old media itself. So in the old days, I made one large print of that 6-foot print. And what you have to do is you have to project, right? And expose the film vertically. And there's so many anomalies that can happen. Now it's a light jet laser that you can make a chromogenic print with laser precision, right? And then you can work on the scan. You can work on the scan to balance and enhance the grain of the film, to bring out the particularity of that film in the way you want. So these are things that could not be done before, right? Can only be done now. But they're used like a window on the past. So it's a kind of retrospective, back to the future kind of idea that this is film work that can only be done in the digital era. And it's so subtle that, you know, like sometimes I wonder, I spend all that effort and expense at it. Does it even show to somebody else's eye that all that's gone into it? Or is it just my own obsession and fantasy? But I think that's what makes it art, right? It's like, yes, it's this really niche little obsession. But in the conversation about media, this is like the gaze of a meta. It's a higher gaze. The digital gaze is much more expansive, and the medium is very specific. So we are now able to look at ourselves, like, you know, it's like you've gone to a counselor and now you can see your behavior, why you're behaving like this is anger from childhood, you know, and then you stop yourself from having road rage because you've got this other perspective. So like digital film technology, digital photography, especially the print process, the post process, is kind of like that for the old medium. It brings it out and clarifies it. So that's this discussion about medium is actually, that's my work, is a lot involved in that space.
Right. And then the idea of juxtaposition, you know, and like, for example, you can see this with the moire pattern, you know, like when you have when you have, you know, the same pattern but then at a different angle and it's superimposed on top of each other. So like, you know, so I guess in your work I see a lot of juxtaposition of you know, whether it's an idea or a concept or even the way that people are interacting. You're seeing these identities juxtaposed on top of one another. And, you know, and yeah, some ideas are more dominant, some concepts are more dominant, some people are more dominant maybe in a photograph, but really it's the interplay and it's the relationships between them that make the photograph interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. That interplay idea is really in the Cowboy series, especially because the other series, it's a very subtle interplay between media, right? Yes. It's very abstract in a way. Yes. But in the Cowboy project, it's social. It's kind of like a social project. It's the artist as a social butterfly, right? This is my world. It's actually my world, my family, my friends, my art world. But it's also like a constructed world where I create these performances, sometimes on stage, sometimes on the street. Yeah. And so, but it's always this interplay, the unexpected, the kind of, the patterns that emerge from the unexpected are part of it, you know? And then everything is encapsulated in idea in the end, because ultimately, I've figured out that my proclivity or my tendency is towards logos. I remember you said logos, pathos, you know, I'm really like, that's me. I mean, I'm not saying it's higher than the others, you know, like Dionysian, Apollinian, or whatever, you know, like there's all these. But for me, the clarity of idea, even if it's clouded in emotion or expression, is fine. But the clarity of idea is the way I work, right? It's always important. So it's ultimately, you know, I found that even in my writing, there's an underlying geometry of meaning. You know, there's the name of a book actually that I love. I never read it fully. I bought it because of the title. I think it was called The Geometry of Meaning. And so everything, like I see metaphysically, you know, in terms of structures, like Paul Klee's point to line to plane, or the Islamic metaphor of unfolding from, you know, through the dimensions, yes, you know, into proliferation. That's why geometry is so important in Islamic art, because of that deep symbolism of the unfolding, right? And the judgment day will all fold back. Right?
The idea of repetition and also tessellations, you know, the idea that these things are touching infinity because they could go on forever.
Yeah.
you know.
That's the tessellations is about the world, the manifest world, the time world, right? But vertically, there's also the unfolding into the dimensions,
Right, right,
from nothing into the point, into the line, into the plane, into the further dimension of time, and then the folding back will happen on Judgment Day. It's a
right.
metaphor, if you don't have to believe it literally, but it's a metaphor of existence, right?
Because
And
I think of this, like, for example, in the Quran it says, and I think it's also the Christian world, and maybe the Jewish world, they say that God said be and the universe was, you know. And
yeah,
so, like, this idea of the day of judgment, when everything comes back and folds back into the essence of what it was. You're thinking about it. Now, of course, you think about it as a metaphor, you think about it as a kind of symbolism, but if you were to think about it more literally, then we're actually living out the day of judgment every second, because every second we're judging things. We're deciding X, Y, and Z, and then based on what we're deciding, things unfold. So we're actually living out this act of creating and judging in the moment.
yeah, and your conscience is your heaven and your hell too, right? That's
That's
the
right.
other.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And so I mean, so maybe, see, I think religion actually gets its ideas from the humanity. It's not the other way around. It's not that humanity gets its ideas from religion. I think religion gets its idea from humanity and from the humanisms that are so inherent and so
Yeah,
obvious when you really think about it. And so, it's quite interesting then that our societies are based on these ethical principles, or these 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 values. Like how do we articulate our values? I guess that, I mean, we have to draw from something. So I think we draw then from our inherent sense of our, I don't know, like our compass. Like we draw from that moral compass that says this is north. And it's different for different people. Like, if you're autistic, for example, then you see the world different. If you're a psychopath, you see things differently. It's like there there is, I mean, just because everybody agrees to the collective illusion doesn't mean that this is the only way, or this is the best way. It just means that
no, no.
it's
I
the way
think that
we agreed on.
that's the part that's really difficult to understand about religious thinking, right? You have the idea of right and wrong. You have a set of principles, and then everything you do that is wrong is still accommodated to those principles, assimilated to those principles, because of exceptions or conditions. So it's wrong, do not kill, but it's all right, it's a holy war, it's a
Yeah,
crusade, you can go and kill, it's right, your God is on your side. This is the basic idea that everybody applies to practice life, right? And I think some of the best understandings I have of that come from, like, the Bhagavad Gita. It's like very hard to understand how this religion is so unethical, because it's not about, like, Arjuna doesn't want to kill his relatives, but Krishna tells him he has to. It's his duty. Go ahead, right? And don't worry about it. Just do it, right? Just do it. Just do it. Like Spike Lee, whatever. And that's basically it. Because whether you're Obama or Trump, you're just doing it. Right? And don't think that Obama has a better chance to get into the eye of the needle of than Trump. We don't know who has sacrificed everything in the name of the Almighty, and who will be accepted into the gates. We don't really know. It's an illusion to think of right and goodness in a certain way. And according to that Krishna idea, what matters is pure action without seeking reward. That's it. So the action itself doesn't matter. It's your duty that determines the action.
right.
The quality of the action that is pure is one that does not seek reward, does not regret failure, does not celebrate success. It's just pure action, right? This is like so weird. Like, for years and years and years, I can't get it, But yet I do get it. I do get it because
Because everybody's always measuring actions for what they gained, what they
yeah,
achieved, what was the success or lack thereof.
yeah. Because how can you say that that guy killing me is bad, but me killing that guy is good? But we say it all the time.
Yes.
So the Bhagavad Gita allows you to put yourself in a meta position and say, if you're that guy, that's good. If you're this guy, this is good. The only thing that matters is don't be angry, don't be hateful, don't be proud, don't think of it as your personal action. Dedicate it to, be a samurai. Just do it. Just do it. You're working for the Lord, the Master. You have a battle plan. It's not about good and bad anymore. You have an action to do. Go and do it. Right? Now, how do you determine what is your action in life? That is the hard part. The Hindu will say it's your caste duty, it's your family duty, your father said, your mother said, your government said, the military sent you to fight on draft. Is that your duty? As an artist, I think the first duty is to find your own duty. Find what is right. And then you... But it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I look at things kind of, like Obama is not, I love Obama and I don't like Trump, but, from a global perspective, Obama was awful. America was awful under Obama, in terms of drones, in terms of Julian Assange, the persecution of Assange, which is one of the most horrible, all happened under Obama.
Snowden.
Yeah, all these things, good people being punished brutally, collateral victims by inhuman killing machines, all under the sweet and smiling Obama. Is he better than Trump? Even they say the deportations, the highest number of deportations under any president is Obama. Even though we think he's such a nice guy, he was just a facade for America. And so is Trump, another ugly facade for the same America, So then you start thinking in terms of what the Gita says, the Bhagavad Gita says, and it kind of starts making sense. Hitler and the Nazis were so bad because they lost the war. If they won the war, they might not be so bad, And if you look at history, while the British were fighting the horrible Nazis, they killed millions and millions, almost the same number in India, by pure neglect. Churchill said, fuck it, don't send them the food. Take the food for the war. Let them die. They're all half naked fuck kids anyway, whatever. The British, while fighting Nazism, did a Nazism by neglect on which part of India, I don't know, Bengal famine, I think it was in Bengal. They died by the millions. But we don't remember that because we won the war.
Because, and that's the thing, that history is written by the winners.
Yeah. So that idea that they are wrong, we are right,
all that goes out the window. And
yeah.
But then some people say that if there is no right and wrong, then we live in sort of an amoral world where there's no distinction. And I think a lot of people find that very scary. But
yeah.
In a way, I actually find it quite comforting that really all these superficial things that we've attached meaning to, right and wrong, good and bad, at the end of the day, it's all just meaningless.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's nihilistic. I think that's in a way.
I think if you do that, it's a bit like the objective subjective problem. If you do that, what it does is it puts a responsibility back on you to consider everything carefully and do what you feel is the best way, your instinct tells you is the best way. It's more responsible. If you don't have a frame and you still have to act, then you have to decide.
Yes.
Can I step that way? There's some ants over there. Does that matter or not? Right? Or, can I eat the meat? Does it matter or not? Can I, kill that person in the war? If you don't follow the order, then you have to decide on each thing, and it's more responsible. It's harder.
It's harder. Yeah, it's much harder. It's much harder. And a lot of people don't have the fortitude or even the courage to take on that responsibility. It's easier to be told what to think. It's easier to be told what to do. It's easier to be a cog in the machine. And so I think being an artist, like you said, the first duty is to decide what your duty is.
Yeah.
And I think that's very profound. And I think that's something that really resonates with me. So
yeah, no, I think that's what, I mean, even not an artist, right? Even like my dad was a lawyer and I thought I would be a lawyer. The first thing I studied was law. And so it's like, it's finding your path anyway in life, right? Just because you're good at math doesn't mean you're going to enjoy being an accountant, right?
Well,
But that's what our parents so worried about material safety. I mean, I'm worried about my kids in the same way. I get it.
yeah.
But really, you love your child and you want them to do a job that is mundane and dry. Wouldn't a loving parent say, go on, be a musician, go on, be a photographer. Never mind if you can't get food, go and enjoy. Go and find something you enjoy. But of course, that's just as crazy as telling your kid you got to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer.
So there you go. So really, you can't do anything right as a parent. You just,
No.
you just can't do anything right, because no matter what, it's insane.
I mean, you can only base it on what you think, what you feel. Like, I would die to be a lawyer. I could have been a good lawyer, I think. You know, in fact, I liked certain parts of the law when I studied it. I was good at certain parts of it.
Right.
But the job of the lawyer, the kind of social position of the lawyer, the responsibilities of the lawyer, all these things didn't fit with me. Right? Of course, I would have liked to have a Mercedes. I always thought I'd have a 250 SL from the 60s, 70s, that super Mercedes. I always dreamed I'd have it, and now I know I'm never going to have that car. But I don't mind, because like I wouldn't have wanted to be a lawyer.
Never say never. Maybe Trump will buy your whole collection for the White House as his parting gift. He'll say, you know what, we'll put up all this work.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of basic hurdles though, like.
Yeah. And it's true. Like taking a certain path is going to have a certain consequence. Yeah. And if you were a lawyer, maybe you'd have that car. But then again, what if you were born into a rich family? What if you were born into a billionaire family and you could have whatever you wanted, but then you're completely bored because really there's nothing for you to strive for.
Some of the great artists were exactly that. They had the leisure and the safety to explore their art, like some, right? They had the money, so they went and said, okay, I want to do this stuff, and they did it. Or another opposite example, different example is I think he's the richest Indian, Tamil or whatever in Malaysia, Ananda Krishnan. He's a multi-world level millionaire, like Forbes list kind of person. And he has only one son, and he's a Tamil, and his wife is from Thailand, right? But he's Malaysian, and his kids, I don't know where they were born, but I think they have 2 kids. The only son, who you imagine would take over the whole empire, like the massive global empire, he's a Buddhist monk. He completely gave everything up and followed the mother's tradition, religion, Buddhist, and he's actually living for how many decades as a monk? With nothing, right? Doesn't want it. Maybe he'll come one day and take it all back when it all happens. I don't know, but it doesn't look like it. He really found a different path from his dad. Right?
Well, and it's the same thing with the Buddha, right? Like the Buddha, he was born into a royal
Yeah.
Yeah, and he gave it all up to be a monk. So you never know. Like no matter what hand of cards you're dealt, what matters is what you do with it.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Cool. That's a long way from basic conceptual art. But it fits, right? It fits. I think it fits. I think the whole thing kind of is about ideas and values being overtly articulated as opposed to inherently assumed.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed.
I think that's the basic thing about conceptual art, other than the fetishistic or the idea is an artwork. That's finished now. That's like, it was cool for a while, right? Now it's a modality that interacts with others. And, like when I make my work, one of the really important things is the finish is very professional and art. It indexes art. I spend a lot of money on stupid things like frames, handmade frames, seamless corners, because I kind of want to acknowledge that other period of concept and immateriality is gone, and any gesture in that regard would be a little bit pretentious, right, and not really acknowledging the fact that your work is art the moment it leaves your hand. you know, and it's not like you're not struggling for it to be art. You've got a piece of paper saying you have a master's in art and you have a name artist. You can do whatever shit you want. It's already art. So don't pretend that it's not art. It may not be famous art, but it's art. Right? but you know, but still.
Like it's the same thing. Like why is Justin Bieber, you know, considered a musician who's, I mean, like if you want to measure success by you know, in terms of technique, or in terms of in terms of, you know, um, proficiency on an instrument, you know, I mean, Justin Bieber is probably not even in the top 20 or top 30% of all the world's great musicians who are alive, you know, but he's richer than so many people, you know, who are much better at their craft than he is. So if you want to measure success by your accomplishments in in a financial way, or in a, you know, in terms of reach, you know, in terms of how many people know about Justin Bieber and know about his music, then fine, Justin Bieber is much more successful than I am. But if I look at my own craft and I look at the what I've done in terms of technique, in terms of, you know, the conceptual, you know, uh, accomplishments that I've made through my art, then I would say I'm more successful than Justin Bieber. But if you gave this same compass, or this same, you know, criteria of success to a third party, to a quote unquote neutral party, who would they decide is more successful, me or Justin Bieber? And so these kinds of questions, you know, they they beg the question, you know, how important is it to be a virtuoso, or to be a genius, or to be, or to be well regarded by your peers in your craft, you know, to say that, oh, you know, what you do is art, or it's not art, you know.
I mean, the trouble with that whole thing is, you know, the more difficult and forward thinking your work is, the more difficult it is for you to find people who get it and even can talk to you about it and want to write about it and stuff like that. And that situation is the same, even if your work is ridiculous and crap and naive, you would have the same problem of finding people who want to talk about it, right?
Yes.
So it's very confusing. You'll never know whether the reason nobody's talking about your work is because
It's shit, or because it's too yeah.
honestly, unless you got an ego like a, you know, like a ostrich egg,
Yeah.
you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. You'd have doubts all the time. So that is the challenge of the artist, to me, to be
Yes.
doing that all the time.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, you might be like a fool. You might be an idiot. Doesn't matter.
Yes.
Just go with it. Go
Yeah.
with what, you know, be reflective, get the feedback, you know, don't ignore the feedback, keep going.
And I love what you said about how, you know, how the university, I mean, even the idea of university is becoming, you know, questionable, like, or even passe. That now it's about peer review. It's about, you know, it's about building your, about building your network, and, you know, and getting accredited by people that are considered to be, you know, experts in their field, or considered to be working
Leaders.
thought leaders.
Yeah.
That's the term, thought leaders, people that are considered to be leaders in the field, right? um, I think you're absolutely right in that assessment. And you know, and when I pointed this out to my parents, and when I pointed this out, because I actually dropped out of high school, to give you some personal history here. I actually dropped out of high school in grade 12, just 6 months before I was about to graduate, because I said, you know what, I'm gonna do music, and I'm gonna pursue my path, you know, and I'm gonna do it on my own terms. I don't want to do it. I don't want to go to university. I don't want to do this conventional path. And now, you know, now I'm enrolled in a university, and you know, and I'm just questioning the whole thing. I'm like, why am I in university? Why did I basically, did I compromise my position? Did I
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard. Like, you're really young, right? And I'm like, like basically, if I talk to you about this stuff as a peer, as an equal, it would be different than if I talk to you as
as
a
a
person
professor.
of a different generation. Like, I think of my own kids who might probably be older than you.
Yeah,
That what would I say to them, right?
yeah,
Like, I still think, like my daughter, who did photography.
at Ryerson. Yeah,
I advised her, if you really want to be a photographer, don't go to university. So I did it. I'm not just like making it up. I told, as a university professor, I told my daughter, if really you want to be a working professional photographer, don't go to Ryerson, go to Langara and do the professional diploma. So
right.
we applied for that, and she got a place waiting for her, for after high school. And then we thought about it. She thought about it, and she says, I like photography, but I'm not interested in being a professional. I want to learn about photography, but I also want to have other options. So then immediately it became clear, okay, now you can't go to Langara. That's not going to help you. They're not going to help you think about anything else. So in your case, yes, you better apply to a few university courses. And so she chose her, against my first advice, she said, I want to go to university.
Right.
She went to Ryerson, which is a great school,
Yeah.
pretty technical. So now she's got a degree, which actually gives her, like what I'm saying is like, I'm talking about the future, right?
Mhm.
Right now, degrees are still good currency. Degrees are still like right now. With COVID, I don't know anymore. It's kind of dodgy, right? If you're starting right now, what would you do? It's a very technical question of appraising what's going to happen in the immediate future to the whole, all sectors, not just education, business, everything is going to change in the next year, I think, next 2 to 5 years. But right now it's still good currency. Having a degree, I mean, I must say that the education that you get these days is very, what do you call, like off the rack, what do you call it? It's not, it's very, it's a product. We've turned it into a mass commodity off the conveyor belt education, right? So you have to get to a master's level before you get a real sense of how an education can be beneficial to knowledge. You have to work through the undergrad and then go look for a good master's and a good connection and then you might get something. And it's out there. It is out there. Don't discount university education, even though I said it. I'm referring really to the trajectory of the future.
Yes.
But right now, I would say university could be the thing that you need. The people are all in it. Like all the artists have come off the street and gone into the universities. So, if you're going out on the street looking for an artist mentor, you won't find him. The joker is a university professor and getting research grants, man. So yeah, no, that's what's happened in the last 20 years. There's no artist outside the university. Everybody's got a hustle
everybody's tied to academia. But
yeah.
you see, that's what I'm saying. Like, okay, so I'm thinking about like how my practice would make sense in a university context, and I realized, if I didn't have to do a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, and I could go straight on to a doctorate or even a postdoc, if I had some sort of research fellowship, that would be amazing, because then I would get credit for all the work that I'm doing, including this podcast. I would get credit for doing all this stuff. But as it turns out, I have to slog all the way through the bachelor's degree and do all the shit that everybody's telling me to do. Like learn the blues scale. Like.
No, but I think that's about it. You have to do it. You can't escape. It's like just do it faster than other people if you can, and move through it. But because I think there's a lot of goodies out after that. Potential learning, potential engagement, access to technology, access to funding through the university system that's not available outside.
Agreed.
How it would work outside is I'm guessing because it's music, but you would be a successful person in industry, quasi-art, quasi-industry, and then you would support yourself, right? And network and get the equipment, get the range of network. That's another way. But it's a different kind of, it's not a very esoteric practice. You'd have to be successful in the mainstream as a producer or as an artist, right? And then that would be different. So if you're really into kind of esoteric, researchy type of stuff, the university context is is, I would say, still the only context. Unless you are able to stand on your own, I don't know how, right? Because this stuff doesn't bring money. This stuff, you know, doesn't bring money, and it needs money. Music, equipment, technology, it needs money.
Yeah.
Unless you make it, you know, like, I don't know, you become an instant hit with your Zapparite, you know, perversities, somehow you make it as well. That's amazing. But I don't see how that's going to happen, except for 1 out of a million, maybe, you know.
Yeah, no,
So,
it's ridiculous. Because I mean, even people whose careers, I look. There's a guy called Cameron Carpenter who's a virtuoso organist who had an instrument built for himself called the International Touring Organ. He went to Juilliard. He studied there. He got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Juilliard, and I think it's now he's 40. He's 40 something. He's like sort of mid career. He had to take out a huge loan to get his instrument built, and the loan was given to him by Sony, which is the company that he's managed by. And so now every time he did a concert, every time he sold a recording, they would take a certain percentage off to pay back the cost of him building his instrument. So, I mean, that's a potential ways to get signed, like you said, but it's 1 in a million. Yeah. It's 1 in a million, because how do you get your work, how do you become signed by something like Sony or Columbia, or I don't know, one of these big record labels? And then,
and only somebody who believes in himself will even get there, right? So don't let me put you off, right?
No, I know. Listen, it's not that I don't believe in myself. Listen, yeah. If I didn't believe in myself, I wouldn't be on this path. I mean, you know this. As an artist, if you don't have a certain what's the word? A certain security in the belief in that what you're doing is important and valuable, you wouldn't do it. Right? You wouldn't waste your time. So at least if you were a sensible person, you wouldn't waste your time. Now, to me, like the idea of getting a record label, to sign me, I mean, that's a great idea. But then you realize, once the record label signs you, they own you. They own your masters. They tell you what to do. They tell you. I mean, it's like ownership. They own you. And I've never liked the idea of owning of somebody owning me, and so
like for me, right? For me, with my cowboy project, already successful Singapore Biennale, great platform, right? And when that happened, I said, okay, now I must be realistic and think practically in terms of a career as an artist, because I want my work to be embedded in the story, not to be like this, like you said, working, no point, right? So I thought I had made it into the gateway, not that I'd made it, but now the gate was open. Right. I had a major event, right?
Yeah.
Major event. So I have to now exploit this, and I have to network, and I have to build. So I worked really hard with a couple of, and in the end, it became one gallerist that might fit through a connection and everything in Malaysia.
Right.
And over a couple of years, I went back and forth. I went back a lot, and we met and talked. And, it felt like she was being polite because I was introduced, or she was really interested. I don't know, because it's really hard to know. But she gave me a lot of time. We spent a lot of time together. And in the end, I was really disappointed, because she says, you're really interesting, but I don't think I can move your stuff. Okay. Bottom line, very blunt and straight. Okay. That's it. Case closed. After that, I stopped working, didn't look for another gallery, because I realized that happens after 2 years of negotiation and talking before you become their artist. How would they be thinking once you're their artist and they've invested in you? They'd be thinking, not, I can't sell your stuff. They'll be thinking, this is what you have to do so that I can sell more of your stuff.
Right, right.
And you have to be then super strong. And some artists really are. These are the real heroes, to be in the gallery system and then dominate the, like record labels, like some of the rock stars who can do their own thing. There are people like that. Yes. But it's really, really tough. It's like Tarkovsky is a filmmaker working in the Soviet system, making whatever the fuck film he wants and getting away with it. Like, how did he do it in that system, But there are people like that, but they're really, very special people, right?
Yeah,
not just artists, but also like politicians and fighters and all rolled into one.
Yes.
So I for me now, I think the strategy is just, as long as I can keep making my work and showing it and exposing it like this, even this is good, right? It's just a podcast, it's between artists, it's like in a small circuit, but this is enough. This is important. People that are interested are listening. At least one person is listening and we're sharing. This is good.
Well,
Don't worry that it's not the National Gallery. It doesn't matter.
Right. And that's the other thing is, like this podcast, when I started it, I was sorry, that was my mom. Ay, ay, ay. So, what was I even saying? Oh yeah. So the podcast is kind of small, but, but it's quite interesting. The people that I've interviewed for the podcast are like really established, really interesting people in their respective fields. And so, I asked myself, why are people like you agreeing to be on this podcast when this podcast doesn't really have the kind of reach that, say, like if you did a podcast, I don't know, with the National Gallery would have, like something like that. And I think the reason is because if you're having a conversation that's worth having and a conversation that's interesting, then there's potential for the podcast to grow. There's potential that the work that's being done is going to mean something to somebody. Even if it doesn't reach 100,000 people, if it reaches 100 people, and out of those 100 people, maybe 10 people are really like able to do something for you, or able to further your work or your practice in some way, shape, or form. Even with that, it's worth it,
Yeah, no, I think, well, to answer your question more bluntly, just for myself, I've just enjoyed our phone conversations. You reached out for a start, right? Like, we could have met in Lisbon because we were both there, right? So we didn't meet. Did you go to Lisbon?
No. In fact,
Oh, okay.
I didn't go to Lisbon. I was hoping to go, but my piece was the piece that I presented at Jubilee Arts at the national level. It went over time, so that.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, I remember that story. Yeah, I remember that story.
So it went.
But anyway, you reached out, and I entertain anybody that reaches out, but I don't repeat conversations unless it's interesting, right? So we've developed quite a few conversations since we started talking.
Yes.
And so the idea of having myself presented within your conversational frame seemed perfectly valid and better than many other scenarios that might be more professional. I knew that here's a guy that kind of digs what I'm doing and understands, and so we can talk, right? So that's it. I think that's why people are coming to talk to you, because they get the sense that you know what they're doing, and they're happy with that.
I think you're right because honestly, like sometimes I ask myself, why are these people talking to me? And that's kind of the whole self-doubt thing. But I'm grateful for having these conversations, because I think just by virtue of having the conversation, it creates a small dent. It creates some sort of impact. And actually, I pointed this out to somebody. Somebody was telling me, that podcasts are kind of like very mainstream now. Like that we had this conversation on the phone that podcast, the medium is becoming just it's becoming almost overdone, right?
Yeah, especially since COVID, it's become like necessary, right? It's become like, yeah.
But I was I was experimenting with podcasts from the time I was about 10 or 11 years old in school, as part of my IT class, part of our information technology class. And so it's quite interesting that, that I've come back to this medium after so many years, and with this kind of, like I'm saying, okay, I want to have these kinds of conversations that are not happening in the mainstream. So creating a niche, or existing within a niche and fulfilling some sort of need or some sort of want within the community. So for me, of course, it's the intellectual and artistic community, but I think it's important. I think the work is important. That's why I'm doing it, And
Yeah, I think it's nice that you're doing it, and I think you have a kind of way of showing people that you understand what they're doing. So that makes you attractive to them, because a lot of people who are doing difficult things don't have many people who are interested in what they're doing. You know, even if they're famous and they're whatever, do people really understand what they're doing, right? So if you want to talk about what I'm doing, I'll talk to anybody, right? But actually not many people want to talk about what you're doing. You know what I mean? They really don't want to get to the bottom of it.
yeah.
So the fact that you're interested is what makes people respond, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
And
I know, because I also do things that are obtuse and esoteric. And so when somebody shows interest in what I'm doing, then like you said, it's like you're willing to entertain the conversation. You're willing to have the conversation, because there's just not that many people that are willing to have the conversation.
yeah.
But it's funny because like another podcast that like it's a podcast by the Royal Canadian College of Organists. It's called Future Stops. And and apparently they knew about my work, but they were like, oh, but you haven't done anything on the organ for almost a year and a half, so we that's why we didn't consider you as a guest. So I reached out to them and I said, oh, I want to be a guest on the show, on the podcast. And they're like, oh, we really respect your work is really great, but you haven't done anything for a year and a half. And I said, well, there's nothing that you can see that I've done, but I've been doing lots of things. It's like this idea of, suddenly you were at the Singapore Biennale, and now, a few years later, people will be like, oh, so what have you done with the Cowboy Project? And, and it's like they don't understand that, that even
The work is ongoing, right? The
yeah,
work is
that's right. It's an ongoing thing. It's something it's something that's over a long period of time, and it's hard to show exactly what the work is. Sometimes it's hard to articulate exactly what it is, the work that you're doing, because it's not in the public eye. It's not in the public sphere.
Yeah.
And
I mean, back to that conversation, I think the public eye is very important to recognize and respect, and to seek the grace of the public eye is really, I think it's necessary, but not to be beholden to it.
right.
That's the balance. It's a hard balance to find, but I think that's what I've
To not pander to it.
always done. Like I have pieces in the National Gallery in Malaysia, right? Even though my practice is so sparse, I still manage to get a couple of things in there, right? So like that's important to me. It's not like, oh, I don't care about recognition. No. Because that's the story that's going to be embedded in for the future generations. If you don't get embedded in that story, it'll be forgotten. Whatever you did will be lost in the sands of time. So it's important to remember that, right? You can't say, fuck off, I don't care, really, unless you're going to break it all and be such a hero. Yeah, sure, go ahead. But most of us, if we say we don't care and the system doesn't care, and then we just forgotten.
Yes.
So I think it's important to care that they care, but not to struggle to fit their models. Like if they really don't like what you're doing, let it go.
Right.
I mean, don't change what you're doing. Yeah, cool. This has been nice.
Well, thank you so much for this. I mean, we this is probably the longest podcast that
I know. I was getting a bit like, who's going to be following this podcast, man? Except you and me, we're going to review it and take notes on what to do next.
Well, I mean, I'm going to upload it onto YouTube, and I'm going to share it on my social media and whatnot. But who's going to listen to a 4-hour podcast?
Well, maybe we can dip into it or something, cut it up. I don't know, but it's fine. It's there. Like it's a record. It's cool. No, I'll enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that we did it, and I'm glad that we recorded it, and it's been such a pleasure, and I'm really glad this exists now as kind of document to all of our of our conversations, of all of our ideas, not all of our ideas, but you know what I mean. It's captured our process. It's captured us in.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy because I mean, to be very sort of I don't know, sentimental about it. Like as you're getting older, it's nice to to engage with younger people as peers. It's really quite hard, really. Either people don't care about you or they look up to you, you know? It's like, it's actually not really like that for artists. We don't really have age in art, right? There's no age, there's just art.
Yes.
So it's nice to connect through, you know, and yeah, maybe we'll work together. Like you said, you know, like there's certain things that we might do together, and this is just the start.
Yes. Well, I think that megaphone idea of using, megaphones is such a it's such a powerful concept, and yeah, I mean, there's like I said, there's so much of your work that resonates with mine that I think, even if I make soundtracks for the pictures of the,
Yeah, cool.
like I yeah, I'm so excited to see what arises, because the possibilities are endless, you know.
Good. So
And
nice to talk, Afra.
one more question: what did you think
Yeah.
about the record? What did you think about?
Aha, yeah, no, it was great. It was great. Like, okay, so let's be blunt on and brutal online.
Yes, yes, yes.
There were things that maybe you need to take back to your company that's doing the work
Yeah,
in terms of
yeah.
quality of the pressing and the cut. So, I mean, I didn't raise it with you before because I don't think it really matters. It's fine. But for you to know, so that, you know, so the opening of the disc, it's cut in a different way from a normal pressing, right? It's
Right.
probably cut rather than pressed.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so
It is. It is. Yeah.
the opening of the disc is not clean,
Yes.
and there were dents into the groove where the needle comes down, so it kind of got a bit crackly, crack a lot before it got in. And then there was a failure in the track where it kind of got stuck, so I had to put a little coin on the stylus to let it ride through, you know. So that's technical, like that's good for you to know, so that, you know, your customers, your collectors aren't getting you know, faulty products or whatever.
Yes.
But the piece itself was delightful. Like, I loved it. Like, I mean, I already chose that piece because it was jazzy, right? I didn't just choose randomly from the list. I went through your podcast, and I found the piece, and I chose the pieces the piece that I liked. And I remember the reason why I liked it. It kind of had this, you know, 70s Chick Corea, there's almost a bossa something in there, something about that Return to Forever kind of sound. I don't know what it was. There's something in it. I thought, okay, and it seemed in the recording that you did for me, it came out a bit more that jazzy, you know, more conventional jazzy feel.
Right.
And then the Cowboy Dango, you know, that's so nice. You know. Actually, my daughter and her friend, who both play music also, they're cracking up every time. And they didn't understand why you were saying cowboy, you know, because I'd given you the Malay way of saying cowboy. I'd recorded it, so you knew exactly how to say it.
Yes.
So it was funny, it was cute, it was I love it. It's good.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a fun little project, and I mean, yeah, I'm definitely gonna talk to the company and say, look, these were the faults, and see if they can improve it, because I did a second version of the project, like I did a second series in that project. So I'm gonna try to make sure that the recordings that are made now, are a little bit better in quality. But I think part of the, I'm not going to say the charm, but part of the aesthetic of the
Oh
project
yeah,
is that it's lo-fi, it's kind of dingy, it's
yeah,
not really it's not really a very polished thing. But
yeah.
but but ideally, if it was up to me, of course, the recording would have been flawless. But
Yeah, no, I don't think the recording is the issue. It's just like, like when you think of, I mean, this is hi-fi issue, right? This is like for I'm not even a hi-fi connoisseur. I have decent speakers and basic secondhand turntables that are kind of okay, but
yeah,
my speakers are really good, right? All good KEF speakers, KEF C series speakers, not even super expensive, but carefully chosen for the kind of sound they make. I've got two types. I've got one that's in the dining room that's more like rock, and the one here is more like classical. I've done a little bit of work on that. So the thing that
quite particular. You're quite particular for someone who claims not to be that knowledgeable about music.
No, I mean, you just can hear it. You can just hear it. I only learned by trying this.
You're a hidden connoisseur, a hidden official.
Yeah.
You sort of hide behind the cowboy hat.
Yeah, but getting back to your niche, right, with the artifact.
Yes.
The technical thing about records, LPs, pressings, is that if your hi-fi is too good, you can't play all your old records, man. It jumps all over the place. It sounds horrible.
Yes.
So you go and play it on your old hi-fi that you put in the store, and it sounds great again because the stylus is heavy and it just cuts through, right?
Yeah.
So this is a problem. I couldn't even play it on my better hi-fi. So I took it to the one I gave my daughter, which is a very basic turntable, and I did it by hand. And there it played fine until it got stuck, so it needed to be even heavier. So it's almost like it's meant for the really, really like basic, heavy armed, it would play fine, right? But when you play it on a better system, then it's too rough. So I guess that's what it is. That's the product, right? That's the thing. So I was just like, I just thought I'd share it with you so that it helps you pitch it.
Right.
But as far as the joy of receiving a customized piece of music, is brilliant. It's a brilliant idea. It's so good.
Well, thank you so much, Niranjan. This has been a real pleasure, and I'll let you know as soon as it's uploaded. I'll send you the link.
That's cool. That's cool, Afras. We'll do it again, sometime down the road, a different topic. And I really enjoyed it. And it's really like a lot of experience, right? For what it's worth, like a lot of experience to share. And it's good to talk about stuff that's wider, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. Thank you.
All right.
And we'll catch up soon.
Okay, sounds good. Bye.
Cowboy Dango.
Cowboy Dango, yes.